A 6-year-old girl walks into a diner during the worst thunderstorm the Ozarks have seen in a decade. She's alone. No coat, no parents, just a backpack held against her chest like a shield and a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. She sits beside a broken jukebox and doesn't say a word to anyone, not the waitress, not the truckers, not the cook watching her through the kitchen window. But when a scarred biker walks through that door dripping rain and engine grease, she looks at his motorcycle through the glass and says 7 words that will tear open a grave the underworld spent 6 years trying to keep sealed. My dad had a bike like that. What happens next will shake you to your core. Stay with me until the very end of this story. I promise you, you won't see the twist coming. If this hits you, drop a like, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and let's ride. The storm came sideways, not the kind that rolls across the Missouri flatlands with any sense of warning. This one dropped out of a black sky like something personal. Like the weather had a grudge against every mile of cracked asphalt between Springfield and the Arkansas border. Rain hammered the 2-lane highway so hard it turned the road into a river, and the wind bent the pines along the shoulder like old men trying to touch their toes. Cole Maddox felt the front tire lose grip for the 3rd time in 2 miles and knew he was out of chances. He was 59 years old. Bad left knee from a construction accident in '94. Worse right shoulder from a bar fight he couldn't remember the details of, but could still feel every morning when he reached for the coffee pot. His beard was more gray than brown now, and the leather cut he wore, faded black, Iron Saints MC stitched across the back in silver thread that had lost most of its shine, smelled like 20 years of highway and cigarette smoke and decisions he'd stopped trying to explain to people who weren't there when he made them. He pulled off the highway at a gravel turnout he almost missed through the wall of rain. The diner sat back from the road like it was embarrassed to be there. Hand-painted sign. Half the letters washed out. A neon open sign in the window buzzing the way dying things buzz. Not quite committed to going dark, but not really trying to stay lit either. Cole killed the engine and sat on the bike for a moment, rain pouring off the brim of his riding cap, soaking through his jeans. He didn't move right away. Men like Cole never did. You learn to sit still when the world's throwing everything at you. You learn to breathe. You learn that rushing into shelter is just another way of admitting you're afraid of getting wet. He swung his leg over, boots sinking into gravel mud, and walked toward the door. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease and something floral that had no business being in a place like this. Maybe air freshener. Maybe the ghost of some waitress's perfume from a shift that ended hours ago. 4 booths, a counter with 6 stools, a kitchen visible through a rectangular window cut into the wall. 2 truckers sat in the far booth not talking to each other, which meant they'd been driving partners long enough that silence was more comfortable than conversation. A heavy-set woman behind the counter looked up when the door opened, saw Cole's cut, and her expression went through 3 stages in about 2 seconds. Surprise, judgment, resignation. "Sit anywhere," she said. "Coffee's hot. Menu's on the table." Cole nodded. He didn't smile. Not because he was trying to be hard, because smiling took energy he'd stopped wasting on strangers somewhere around his 45th birthday. He chose the booth closest to the window so he could watch his bike. Not because he thought anyone would steal it in this weather, because the bike was the only thing in his life that had never lied to him. That's when he saw the girl. She was sitting on the floor beside a jukebox that clearly hadn't worked in years. The glass was cracked. The song cards inside were yellowed and curling. She had her knees pulled up to her chest and a stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. Gray, matted, missing the left ear. Her hair was dark and tangled, still damp. No coat. A thin, long-sleeve shirt that was too big for her, probably a hand-me-down from someone who didn't care enough to find the right size. Her shoes had holes near the toes. She wasn't crying. That's what got Cole first. Kids that age, 5, 6 maybe, they cry when they're scared. They cry when they're cold. They cry when they're alone in a roadside diner during a thunderstorm at 9 o'clock at night. This girl wasn't crying. She was watching. Her eyes moved around the room with a kind of quiet surveillance that didn't belong on a child's face. She tracked the truckers. She tracked the waitress. She tracked the kitchen window where the cook's shadow moved behind the steam. And when Cole walked in, she tracked him too. Not with fear exactly. With assessment. The way a small animal decides whether the thing that just entered the clearing is predator or something else. Cole sat down, ordered coffee. Black. The waitress brought it in a mug with a chip on the rim and didn't ask if he wanted anything else. He drank, watched the rain, tried not to look at the girl again because looking twice at a child when you're a grown man in a biker cut in a place like this invites the kind of attention that ends with someone calling the county sheriff. But the girl kept watching him, not staring, watching. There's a difference. Staring is curiosity. Watching is survival. Cole set his mug down. "Hey," he said to the waitress. "The kid. She with somebody?" The waitress glanced at the girl like she'd forgotten she was there. "Been here about an hour. Said she was waiting for someone. I called the non-emergency line, but the storm knocked out the cell tower up on Ridgeback. Landline's dead too." "You just let her sit there?" "What am I supposed to do? Drag her out in that?" She nodded toward the window where lightning turned the parking lot white for half a second. "I gave her a glass of milk. She didn't drink it." Cole looked at the untouched milk on the counter, then at the girl, then at the milk again. He picked up his coffee and walked over. Not fast, not slow. The way you approach something that might bolt. He lowered himself to the floor, knee popping loud enough that the girl flinched, and sat with his back against the wall about 4 feet from her, close enough to talk. Far enough that she had room. "You like hot chocolate?" he asked. She didn't answer. "I'm going to get you a hot chocolate. If you don't want it, that's fine. But it's cold and you're wet, and hot chocolate's better than sitting here pretending you're not freezing." He got up, went to the counter, and came back 3 minutes later with a styrofoam cup. Set it on the floor between them, sat back down. The girl looked at the cup, looked at him, then reached out with one small hand and wrapped her fingers around it. She didn't drink, just held it, like the warmth mattered more than the taste. "What's your name?" Cole asked. "Lucy." "Lucy what?" She didn't answer that. "Okay, Lucy, I'm Cole. That's my bike out there. The ugly one getting rained on." For the first time, her eyes moved to the window. She studied the motorcycle through the water-streaked glass, the heavy frame, the wide handlebars, the custom exhaust that Cole had welded himself in a buddy's garage outside Joplin. She stared at it for a long time. "My dad had a bike like that." She said it simply. Not sad, not nostalgic, just a fact. The way a kid says the sky is blue or dogs have 4 legs. Cole felt something move in his chest, not his heart. Deeper than that. Something in the architecture of who he was, some load-bearing wall that shifted half an inch. "Yeah?" he said carefully. "What kind of bike did your dad have?" "It was black, but the tank had silver on it, like lightning. And there was a skull on the side, but it wasn't scary. Mama said Daddy painted it himself." Cole stopped breathing. The silver lightning, the hand-painted skull. There was only one bike in the history of the Missouri riding community that matched that description. Only one man who wrote it, Elias Ghost Mercer. Cole hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 6 years, not since the warehouse fire outside of Kennett, not since the ATF found dental records in the ashes that matched Ghost's military file. Not since 200 bikers from 11 clubs rode in a funeral procession down Route 60 for a man whose body was never recovered whole. Ghost was dead. Everyone knew Ghost was dead. Cole looked at the girl sitting on the floor of a dead-end diner with a one-eared rabbit and a cup of hot chocolate she still hadn't tasted, and he felt the ground beneath 6 years of certainty begin to crack. "Lucy," he said. "Where's your mama?" The girl's fingers tightened on the rabbit. Not a squeeze, a grip. The kind you learn when holding on is the only power you have. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone." "How long?" Lucy looked at the floor. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on something invisible. "Lots of sleeps," she said. Cole's stomach turned. "Who's been taking care of you?" "Ray." "Who's Ray?" "Mama's friend." She said the word friend the way you say a word you've been taught but don't believe. The way a kid recites a line they've been told to say if anyone asks. "Ray's not here?" "Ray's sleeping. Ray sleeps a lot." She paused. "Ray doesn't like me." She said it without self-pity, without even sadness, like she was reading the weather. Ray doesn't like me. It's raining. The jukebox is broken. All facts. All equal. Cole felt a heat building behind his eyes that had nothing to do with the coffee. He'd been around long enough to read between the lines of a 6-year-old's careful language. Mama's gone. The boyfriend sleeps a lot. The boyfriend doesn't like her. She's alone in a diner during a storm with holes in her shoes and no coat. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to ask about bruises and meals and locked doors and all the questions that men like him learn to ask because the system never did. But she was 6, and she was scared, and pushing too hard would shut her down like a light switch. "You got anything in that backpack?" he asked instead. Lucy hesitated, then slowly unzipped it. Inside was a change of clothes, dirty, a juice box, empty, a granola bar, half-eaten and probably days old, and a photograph. She pulled it out carefully, the way you handle something that's been handled 1,000 times. It was creased and soft, the edges fuzzy from being folded and unfolded. The image showed a man standing beside a motorcycle in front of a garage. He was lean, dark-haired, mid-30s, unsmiling but not hard. The bike beside him was unmistakable. Black frame, silver lightning bolt across the tank, a small skull painted just below the fuel cap in a style that looked almost like scrimshaw. It was Ghost. Cole's throat closed. He'd ridden beside that man for 4 years, shared campsites and bar fights and 3 a.m. conversations about things neither of them would say sober. Ghost was the kind of rider who never raised his voice but made every room go quiet when he walked in. Not because he was dangerous, though he was, because he carried a stillness that made other men's noise feel embarrassing. Ghost had no family that anyone knew about, no wife, no kids, no address that stayed the same 2 months running. He was a ghost in the truest sense, a man who existed in motion and disappeared the moment he stopped. Except now Cole was looking at proof that Ghost had a daughter. "Lucy," Cole said slowly, "there's something else in your bag, isn't there?" She looked at him with those watchful eyes, then reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper, hand-drawn, lines in blue ink on what looked like the back of a placemat from a restaurant. Roads, landmarks, X marks that meant something to someone. A map. "Mama said keep it safe," Lucy whispered. "Mama said if anything happens, don't let nobody have it." "Did your mama say what it leads to?" Lucy shook her head. Then she said something that turned Cole's blood to ice water. "Mama said Daddy might still need it. Might still need it." Present tense. Not past. Not, Daddy would have wanted you to have it. Not, this was Daddy's. Daddy might still need it. Cole stood up. His knee screamed. He ignored it. He walked to the counter and leaned in close to the waitress. "I need your phone." "Told you, lines are down." "You got a radio? CB? Anything?" "Honey, I got a coffee maker and a grill. That's what I got." Cole looked out the window. The storm was a living wall of black water. His phone showed no signal, not even a flicker. He was alone in a diner with a dead man's daughter and a map that might mean nothing or might mean everything, and the only way out was a 2-lane highway that was currently doing its best impression of a river. He went back to Lucy, sat down across from her in the booth this time. She climbed up onto the bench seat opposite him, the rabbit in her lap, the photograph and the map tucked back into the backpack she kept pressed against her chest. "Lucy, listen to me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you tonight, okay?" She studied his face the way she studied everything, carefully, looking for the lie. "People say that," she said. "I know they do." Ray said that. Cole felt his hands tighten into fists beneath the table. "I'm not Ray." "How do I know?" It was the most adult question a 6-year-old had ever asked him, and it deserved an adult answer. Cole reached behind his neck and unclasped a thin chain he'd worn for 11 years. On it hung a small silver medallion. Not decorative, not symbolic, just a piece of metal stamped with a date. He set it on the table between them. "You see that date? That's the day my daughter was born. I haven't taken it off since the hospital put her in my arms." "Where is she?" "She's grown up now. Lives in Oregon. Teaches kids how to read." "Do you see her?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Not enough. That's my fault. Not hers." Lucy looked at the medallion, then at Cole. Then she did something that broke him so quietly he didn't even feel it happen until it was over. She reached across the table and pushed the medallion back toward him. "You should keep it," she said, "so you don't forget." Cole put the chain back on. His eyes were burning. He coughed to cover it. The front door opened. The wind hit first, cold, wet, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and ozone. Then the man stepped in. Not big, but wiry. Hard in the way that cheap living makes people hard. Stained work jacket, jeans torn at the knee, but not fashionably. Eyes that moved too fast and settled on Lucy with a look Cole recognized immediately. Ownership. "There you are," the man said. His voice was flat, controlled, the kind of controlled that's one beer away from not controlled at all. "I've been looking everywhere." Lucy went still. Not frozen, compressed, like she was making herself as small as possible. The rabbit disappeared behind her back. "You Ray?" Cole asked. The man's eyes snapped to him, sized up the cut, the gray beard, the size of Cole's hands wrapped around the coffee mug. "Who's asking?" "The guy sitting with her while nobody else was." Ray's mouth twitched. "She's my stepdaughter. She wanders off. Kids do that." "In a thunderstorm? Without a coat? At 9 at night?" "I said she wanders. I didn't say I let her." Ray took a step toward the booth. "Come on, Lucy. Car's outside." Lucy didn't move. Cole didn't move. The truckers in the far booth had gone very quiet. The waitress had stopped wiping the counter. "Lucy," Ray said again. Harder this time. "Now." "She's dry," Cole said. "She's warm. Storm's still bad. Why don't you sit down, have some coffee, and wait it out?" It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a question. It was the kind of sentence that has a period at the end but feels like a line drawn on the floor. Ray looked at Cole, then at Lucy, then back at Cole. The calculation happening behind his eyes was almost visible. A cold, rapid algebra of risk and consequence. "You don't know anything about this situation, old man." "I know she's 6 years old, and she's got holes in her shoes, and she hasn't eaten anything but half a granola bar. I know her mama's gone, and nobody can tell me where. And I know she's afraid of you. That's enough." Ray's face changed. The control cracked just enough to show what was underneath. Well, not anger, exactly. Something colder, something that saw other people as obstacles or tools. "You're making a mistake," Ray said quietly. "Wouldn't be my first." Ray held Cole's gaze for 5 long seconds. Then he looked at Lucy one more time, not with affection, not with concern, but with the look of a man cataloging his possessions, and turned toward the door. "I'll be in the car," he said. "When the storm breaks, she comes with me. That's not a request." The door shut behind him. The wind howled. Rain hammered the tin roof so hard it sounded like the diner was being buried alive. Lucy exhaled. It was a small sound, the kind of breath you release when a hand unclenches from your arm. Cole had heard that sound before from his ex-wife, from shelter women he'd helped the club relocate over the years, from people who lived their lives measuring the distance between themselves and the next impact. "Lucy," Cole said quietly, "has Ray ever hurt you?" She didn't answer. She just pulled the rabbit tighter against her chest and pressed her back into the booth seat. That was answer enough. Cole pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. He looked at the waitress. "You got a back door?" "Kitchen. Goes out to the lot behind the dumpsters. Why?" Cole didn't answer. He looked at Lucy. "You trust me enough to walk out of here with me?" "Where?" "Somewhere Ray can't follow." She looked at his hands, then at his cut, then at the window where his motorcycle sat in the rain, the bike that looked like her daddy's. "Okay," she whispered. Cole left a 20 on the table, picked up Lucy's backpack, took her hand, small, cold, gripping with a strength that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with having no one else to hold on to. They moved through the kitchen. The cook, a big man with forearms like fence posts, watched them pass without a word. He looked at the girl. He looked at Cole's cut. He looked at the front door where Ray had gone. Then he reached over and locked the kitchen's pass-through window. Not much, but enough. Cole pushed open the back door. The rain hit them like a wall. He shrugged off his leather jacket and wrapped it around Lucy. It swallowed her whole. She looked like a small leather tent with 2 sneakers sticking out the bottom. His bike was in the front lot. Ray's car was in the front lot. Going around meant being seen. He pulled out his phone one more time and got something. One bar, flickering. He had maybe 30 seconds before the signal died again. He typed a text to a number he hadn't used in months. A number that belonged to a man named Hatchet, former sergeant-at-arms of the Iron Saints, now living off the grid near Table Rock Lake. 3 words. Ghost had a kid. He hit send, watched the little progress bar crawl, watched it reach the end, watched the confirmation appear for a fraction of a second before the signal flatlined. The message went through. Cole shoved the phone back in his pocket and looked down at Lucy. She was shivering inside his jacket, the rabbit's one remaining ear poking out near her chin. Rain ran down her face, but she didn't wipe it. She just looked up at him with those eyes. Those ancient, patient, watchful eyes that had no business being in a 6-year-old's skull. "Cole?" she said. "Yeah?" "Is my daddy really dead?" Cole stared at her. The rain pounded his shoulders and soaked through his shirt and ran cold down his spine. Somewhere out front, Ray sat in his car, waiting. Somewhere across Missouri, a text message was landing on a phone that hadn't rung in months. Somewhere in the dark, a map drawn on a placemat pointed to something a dead man left behind. "I don't know, sweetheart," Cole said. "But I'm going to find out." Lightning split the sky so close the thunder came at the same instant. A deafening crack that shook the diner's walls and turned the world white for one blinding second. When the light faded, headlights appeared at the far end of the gravel lot. Not Ray's car, 3 vehicles, black, moving slowly through the rain in formation. No headlight flash, no horn. Just the steady, deliberate approach of people who already know exactly where they're going. Lucy's hand tightened around Cole's fingers. "They found me," she whispered. And Cole understood, with a certainty that settled in his bones like concrete, that whatever ghost had hidden, whatever that map pointed to, whatever truth had been buried for 6 years in a dead man's grave, someone was willing to kill a child to keep it there. Cole didn't think. He moved. He scooped Lucy off the ground with one arm, the bad shoulder screaming, the tendons in his neck pulling tight enough to hum, and pressed her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. That fact alone made him sick. A 6-year-old should weigh more than a bag of groceries. A 6-year-old should be heavy with milk and cereal and the dull gravitational pull of being properly fed. She wrapped her arms around his neck and didn't make a sound. The 3 vehicles crept through the gravel lot like predators circling a watering hole. Cole couldn't see the drivers through the rain and the tinted glass, but he could read the formation. Lead vehicles slightly ahead, the other 2 flanking wide, cutting off the exits on either side of the diner. These weren't locals. Locals didn't move like that. Locals didn't arrive in matching SUVs at 9:30 on a storm-blown Tuesday night in the middle of nowhere. Cole backed toward the tree line behind the dumpsters. His boots slid on wet grass. Lucy's fingers dug into the collar of his flannel shirt. The rain swallowed everything. Sound, sight, distance, turning the world into a gray curtain with headlights burning through it like the eyes of something that had already decided how this ended. He made the trees. Barely. 50 yards of scrub pine and underbrush between the diner's back lot and a county road he remembered seeing on the ride in. His knee buckled on a root and he almost went down, but Lucy's weight shifted at the right moment and he caught himself against a trunk, bark tearing the skin on his palm. Behind them, car doors opened. Cole didn't look back. He pushed through the brush, branches whipping his face, rain driving into his eyes, and when he finally hit the county road, he turned south and started walking. No plan. No vehicle. No phone signal. Just a soaking wet 59-year-old man carrying a dead man's daughter through a storm with nothing between them and whatever was coming except darkness and the stubborn refusal to stop moving. They walked for 40 minutes. Lucy fell asleep somewhere around minute 20, just dropped off with her head against his shoulder like a switch had been flipped. Cole envied her that. The ability to surrender consciousness when the body couldn't take anymore. He hadn't been able to do that since 1987. Sleep came to him like a stray cat. Unpredictable, skittish, never staying long enough to matter. The county road met a farm-to-market highway, and Cole saw a light, not headlights. Something stationary, yellow and warm and low to the ground. A farmhouse. set back from the road behind a cattle gate. He climbed the gate with Lucy still in his arms and walked up the gravel drive and pounded on the front door until a porch light came on, and a woman in her 60s opened the door with a shotgun held at waist height. "I've got a child," Cole said. "She's cold. I need a phone." The woman looked at the girl, looked at the biker cut, looked at the rain pouring off both of them onto her porch. Then she lowered the shotgun 2 inches and stepped aside. The farmhouse smelled like wood smoke and laundry detergent. Cole set Lucy on a couch and the woman brought blankets without being asked. She handed Cole a cordless phone, the kind with the stubby antenna that people in the Ozarks kept because cell towers out here were a suggestion, not a guarantee. Cole dialed Hatchett's number from memory. It rang 6 times. 7. 8. "You better be dying," said a voice like gravel being dragged across concrete. "I sent you a text." Silence. Then the sound of a man sitting up in bed. Springs creaking, a lighter clicking, the first long inhale of a cigarette that would taste like being woken up at midnight for something that couldn't wait. "Ghost had a kid," Hatchett repeated. "Those your words?" "I'm sitting in a farmhouse 12 miles south of Caulfield with a 6-year-old girl named Lucy Mercer. She's got a photo of Ghost standing next to his bike. She's got a hand-drawn map her mother told her to protect. She told me her daddy had a bike with silver lightning on the tank." The silence that followed was different, thicker. The kind of silence that happens when a man who spent 6 years building a wall around a grave suddenly feels the first crack. "Ghost didn't have a kid," Hatchett said. "Ghost didn't have anybody. That was the whole point of Ghost." "I'm looking at her, Hatch. She's 6 years old. That lines up." "Lines up with what?" "With the timeline. Ghost disappeared 6 years ago. If he had a woman nobody knew about, he didn't." "You sure about that?" Another silence, longer this time. Cole could hear the cigarette burning on the other end of the line. Could almost smell it through the phone. "Where's the mother?" Hatchett asked. "Gone. The girl says gone. Doesn't know where. She's been living with some boyfriend named Ray who should have his teeth knocked into his throat, but that's a conversation for tomorrow." "And the vehicles?" 3 black SUVs showed up at the diner right before I got her out. Professional formation, tinted glass. These weren't Ray's drinking buddies. Jesus. I need bodies, Hatch. I need riders, tonight. It's midnight. There's a goddamn flood warning on half the county. And there's a 6-year-old girl on this couch who somebody sent 3 vehicles to collect. I'm alone. I'm unarmed. I'm 59 years old with a blown-out knee and no transportation. You want to talk about the weather, or you want to make some calls?" Hatchett exhaled. The cigarette hissed. "I'll make calls. Stay put. Don't move. Don't open the door for anyone who doesn't know the '08 rally handshake. You hear me?" "I hear you." "And Cole." "Yeah. If this is real, if Ghost had a kid and somebody's hunting her, then whatever he hid is still out there, and the people who burned that warehouse are still out there too." "I know. Those people killed a man to keep a secret." "I know that too. You ready for what comes next?" Cole looked at Lucy sleeping on the couch. The blanket had slipped off one shoulder. The rabbit was clutched against her chest. Her mouth was slightly open and her eyelashes were dark against her pale skin, and she looked so small that the couch seemed like it might swallow her whole. "Doesn't matter if I'm ready," Cole said. "I'm already in it." He hung up. The farmhouse woman, Darlene she said her name was, brought him coffee and a towel and asked no questions. He liked her for that. He sat in a chair by the window with the lights off and watched the road for headlights, until his eyes burned and his back ached and the coffee went cold in his hands. By 3 in the morning, the first motorcycle appeared. The sound came before the light. That low, unmistakable Harley rumble cutting through the rain. A sound that wasn't loud so much as inevitable, like a heartbeat amplified through steel and gasoline. Then headlights. Then the shape of a man on a machine, pulling up the gravel drive, killing the engine, swinging his leg over, and walking toward the porch with the unhurried stride of someone who hadn't slept but hadn't needed to. Hatchett was 63 and looked every year of it. Shaved head, a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. A souvenir from a knife fight in Tulsa that he never talked about because talking about it would require admitting he'd lost. His hands were enormous, scarred across every knuckle, and they shook slightly when he was still. A tremor he blamed on nerve damage, but that Cole suspected had more to do with the things those hands had done and the things they hadn't done fast enough. He stood in the doorway and looked at the couch, at the girl, at the one-eared rabbit. "Well, goddamn," he said quietly. "Yeah," Cole said. "She looks like him." "I know." Hatchet walked over and crouched beside the couch, not touching, just looking. His massive frame folded down until his face was level with Lucy's, and he studied her the way a man studies a wound he's not sure he can close. "I called Deacon," he said without looking up, "and Briggs, and Fuel. They're coming." "Fuel's in Kansas City." "Was. He's on the road." "That's 4 hours. He'll make it in 3. You know how Fuel drives." Cole did. Fuel drove like the highway owed him an apology. "What about Roach?" Cole asked. Hatchet stood up slowly. The tremor in his hands was worse now. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark road and the rain that was finally starting to thin. "I didn't call Roach." "Why not?" "Because Roach was the last person to see Ghost alive." The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Cole stared at Hatchet's back. "Roach was at the warehouse," Hatchet continued, "the night it burned. He said he went to talk Ghost out of going public with the evidence. Said Ghost wouldn't listen. Said he left before the fire started. That was the official story. You believed it." "I believed it because I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was that one of our own handed Ghost over, and I wasn't ready to live in a world where that was possible." "And now?" Hatchet turned from the window. His face was a landscape of old damage. The scar, the deep lines around his eyes, the hollows beneath his cheekbones where the weight had fallen away over years of bad sleep and worse memories. Now there's a kid on that couch with a map her mother told her to protect. A mother who's vanished. 3 black trucks looking for her. And the man who was last seen with Ghost before a building that shouldn't have burned somehow caught fire. He paused. "You do the math." Cole did the math. He didn't like the answer. "If Roach is dirty," he started. "If Roach is dirty, then he's had 6 years to cover it. 6 years to watch all of us grieve and drink to Ghost's memory while knowing exactly what happened in that warehouse." Hatchet's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. Not because he was calm, because he was holding back a fury so deep it scared him. "And if he finds out the girl exists, he'll know the grave is opening." The second motorcycle arrived at 4:15. Deacon, a wiry 51-year-old Army vet with a prosthetic left hand he'd lost to an IED outside Fallujah, and a quiet intensity that made people cross the street when they saw him coming, parked his bike beside Hatchet's and walked in dripping rainwater and motor oil. He saw the girl. He saw the photo Cole laid on the kitchen table. He didn't say a word for a full 90 seconds. Then he sat down and said, "Tell me everything." Cole told him, start to finish. The diner, the hot chocolate, the silver lightning on the tank, the map, Ray, the black vehicles. Deacon listened with his prosthetic hand flat on the table, the mechanical fingers slightly curled, reflecting the kitchen light. When Cole finished, Deacon asked one question. "Did anyone follow you here?" "No." "You sure?" "I walked 40 minutes through the woods in a monsoon with a child in my arms. If someone followed me through that, they deserve to find me." Deacon didn't smile. "Where's the map now?" "In her backpack. She won't let go of it." "Can I see it?" "When she wakes up. I'm not taking anything from that kid while she's sleeping. She's had enough taken." Deacon studied Cole's face for a long time, then nodded. Not agreement. Respect. The recognition that Cole had drawn a line, and the line made sense. Briggs arrived at 5. Big man, 6'4", 260. Most of it gone soft around the middle, but the shoulders and arms still built for work that involved picking up things that didn't want to be picked up. He'd been Ghost's road partner for 2 years before the warehouse. They'd ridden together through every bad stretch of highway between Memphis and Denver. Briggs had been the one to identify what was left of Ghost's bike in the ashes. The melted frame, the twisted handlebars, the fuel tank split open by heat. He walked in, saw the photo on the table, and his face collapsed. Not dramatically, not with tears or sound, just a slow structural failure, like a building settling after the foundation cracks. His mouth opened and closed. His eyes went red. He picked up the photo and held it close to his face and stared at it like he was trying to climb inside the image and go back to the day it was taken. "That's the old garage," he said. "The one off County Road 14 outside Poplar Bluff. Ghost used to work on the bike there." His voice was thick, damaged. "He spent 3 weeks painting that skull. I told him it looked like a tattoo on a gas tank. He told me to go to hell." "Briggs," Cole said carefully. "Did he know?" Briggs set the photo down. His hands were shaking. "Did he know he had a daughter? When he went into that warehouse, did he know?" "I don't know." "Because if he knew and he still went in there, if he knew there was a child waiting for him and he still walked into that building, we don't know what happened in that building. That's what we're trying to find out." Briggs looked at the couch where Lucy was still sleeping. The rabbit had shifted to the crook of her elbow. One small hand hung off the edge of the cushion, fingers slightly curled. "She's got his chin," Briggs said. "You see that? The way it comes to a point. Ghost had that. Made him look stubborn even when he wasn't talking." "She's always stubborn," Cole said. "How long have you known her?" "About 6 hours." Briggs almost smiled. Almost. "And you already know she's stubborn." "She sat on a diner floor for an hour without crying. 6 years old, soaking wet, alone. Didn't cry once. That's not stubbornness, that's survival." "That's Ghost," Briggs said. Fuel rolled in at 6:45 as the sky was turning from black to the color of a bruise. He came through the door with 3 hours of highway rain still dripping off his beard and a look in his eyes that said he'd spent every mile of the drive from Kansas City doing math he didn't want to do. "Who else knows?" was the first thing he said. "Everyone in this room," Cole said. "Hatchet, Deacon, Briggs, you, me, and Darlene." He nodded toward the farmhouse woman who was making breakfast in the kitchen like she hosted biker councils every morning. "Roach?" The name landed differently now. Cole watched it hit each man's face. Hatchet's jaw tightened. Deacon's prosthetic hand closed into a fist with a soft mechanical click. Briggs looked at the floor. "No," Hatchet said. "Not Roach. Not until we know." "Know what?" Fuel demanded. "You telling me Roach is suspect? Roach? He rode with Ghost longer than any of us. He was at the funeral. He gave the eulogy. He was the last one to see Ghost alive," Hatchet said. "And now Ghost's daughter shows up with a map and 3 trucks on her tail. You want to call that coincidence? Go ahead. I'm done with coincidences." Fuel looked like he'd been slapped. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You have proof?" "I have a 6-year-old girl sleeping on a couch and a dead man who might not be dead. That's what I have." The room went quiet. The only sounds were Darlene's spatula scraping a skillet, the tick of a clock on the wall, and the last whispers of rain on the roof. Lucy woke up at 7. She sat up on the couch and saw 4 bikers she'd never met standing in a farmhouse kitchen she'd never been in, and she didn't scream, didn't cry. She pulled the rabbit against her chest and looked at each man with those watchful eyes, measuring them the way she'd measured Cole. Threat or not threat, safe or not safe, real or lying. Cole crouched in front of her. "These are my friends," he said. "They knew your dad." Lucy looked at Briggs. Something in his face, the raw redness around his eyes, the way he held his mouth like he was trying not to break apart, must have registered as something she recognized. Something honest. "You're sad," she said to him. Briggs nodded. He couldn't speak. "It's okay," Lucy said. "I'm sad too." And the biggest man in the room, a man who'd carried engine blocks and bar fight scars and 6 years of unprocessed grief, turned his face to the wall and wept silently, while a 6-year-old girl who weighed nothing at all watched him with the patience of someone who understood that crying was just the sound people make when they've been holding something too long. Lucy let Cole show the map to the others. She sat at the kitchen table eating scrambled eggs Darlene made, eating slowly, carefully, the way a kid eats when food is something that isn't always guaranteed, and watched the men spread the placemat on the counter. The map was crude, but specific. Blue ink lines traced roads that didn't have names but had landmarks. A split oak tree, a bridge with a missing railing, a water tower with the letters faded off. X marks at 3 points. Tiny numbers beside each one that could be coordinates or distances or something else entirely. "This is Ghost's hand," Deacon said. "I'd know it anywhere. He wrote like a doctor with a grudge." "These landmarks," Briggs said, running his finger along a line. "This split oak. I know this tree. It's on the property behind the old garage. County Road 14. "The garage where he worked on the bike," Cole said. "Yeah, the one in the photo." Fuel leaned in. "And this second mark, this bridge. That's on Route 142 south of Doniphan. Ghost used to take that road when he didn't want to be tracked, said the curves kept tailgaters honest." 3 X marks, Hatchett said. 3 locations. He was setting up something. "Or hiding something," Deacon said. "Or building a way out," Cole said quietly. Everyone looked at him. Ghost knew he was in danger. He'd been collecting evidence on the syndicate for months. Laundering operations, shell companies, money moving through biker clubs like water through a pipe. If he knew they were coming for him, if he knew the walls were closing in, he'd have built an exit. Not for himself, for whoever came after. "For the girl," Briggs said. Cole looked at Lucy. She was feeding a corner of scrambled egg to the stuffed rabbit, pressing it gently against the rabbit's fabric mouth, and then eating it herself. A private game. A ritual of tenderness directed at the only companion that had never let her down. "For whoever needed it most," Cole said. Hatchett's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face went very still. "What?" Cole asked. "Roach just texted the club group chat, asking if anyone's heard from me. Says he's been trying to reach me all morning." The room temperature dropped. "Don't answer," Deacon said. "If I don't answer, he'll know something's wrong. If you do answer, you might be telling whoever Roach talks to exactly where we are." Hatchett looked at the phone like it was a grenade with the pin halfway out. Then he set it face down on the counter and walked away. Fuel paced to the window and back. His boots left muddy prints on Darlene's clean floor. "This is wrong," he said. "Roach has been a brother for 15 years. We don't just decide he's a traitor because the timing's bad." "We're not deciding anything," Cole said. "We're being careful." "Careful looks a lot like accusation from where I'm standing." "Then sit down, because standing isn't helping." Fuel's eyes went hard. He was younger than the rest, 44, with the impatience that came from having more years in front of him than behind him. "You showed up last night with a kid nobody knew about, a story that rewrites everything we've believed for 6 years, and now you're pointing fingers at a man who bled with us, who rode with us, who buried Ghost right alongside Nobody buried Ghost," Hatchett cut in. "That's the point. There was no body. There were dental records and a pile of ash that nobody bothered to verify because we were too busy grieving to ask the obvious question." "What question?" "How does a man burn hot enough to destroy a body but leave dental records intact? Think about it, Fuel. Really think about it." Fuel opened his mouth, closed it. The anger drained from his face and something worse replaced it. Doubt. The kind of doubt that doesn't answer questions but poisons every answer you already had. Lucy put her fork down. "The bad men are coming," she said. Everyone turned to her. "What bad men, sweetheart?" Cole asked. "The ones who came to the house before Mama left? They talked to Ray. Ray gave them things, papers, from Mama's room. Then Mama was gone." She paused. "Then they came to school. A man in a black car sat outside every day, watching." Cole felt the floor shift beneath him. "Lucy, did these men ever talk to you?" "One did. He asked me if my mama ever talked about my daddy. I said no." She looked at the rabbit. "I lied." "That was smart, Lucy. Mama said lying is wrong. Your mama was right, but sometimes lying keeps you safe, and keeping you safe is more important than anything." Lucy considered this with the gravity of a child processing a moral adjustment. Then she said, "The man at school had a tattoo. On his neck, a snake eating a number." Deacon leaned forward. "What number?" 8. Deacon and Hatchett exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. Alarm, recognition, confirmation, dread. "That's Consortium Inc., Hatchett said. "The snake and the 8. That's a rank mark. Senior enforcement. The consortium is supposed to be dead, Fuel said. So is Ghost. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different. It wasn't the silence of men thinking. It was the silence of men realizing they were already inside something they couldn't walk away from. That they'd been inside it since Cole picked up that phone at midnight. Since Lucy walked into that diner. Since a man named Ghost painted lightning on a gas tank and decided to fight something bigger than himself. Hatchet picked up his phone, looked at Roach's message one more time. Then he typed a reply. 4 words that felt like pulling a pin. Haven't heard anything. Why? He hit send, set the phone down, looked at Cole. We go to the first X on the map. The garage on County Road 14. Today. Now. Before Roach figures out what's happening. Before whoever sent those trucks regroups. Before that little girl's trail gets any colder for whoever's tracking her. Cole nodded. He looked at each man in the room. Hatchet with his shaking hands. Deacon with his prosthetic fist. Briggs with his red-rimmed eyes. Fuel with his restless boots and reluctant doubt. From this point forward, Cole said, nobody contacts anyone outside this room. No wives, no prospects, no old riding buddies. Nobody. Because if Ghost built a dead man's switch and someone inside the club helped bury him, then everything we thought we knew about our own brotherhood is a lie. And the people who told us that lie have had 6 years to get comfortable. He paused. We're about to make them very uncomfortable. Fuel looked at the floor, then at Lucy, then at the door. I'm in, he said quietly. But if you're wrong about Roach, you owe him more than an apology. You owe him your cut. If I'm wrong about Roach, Cole said, I'll hand it to him myself. Lucy climbed down from her chair. She walked to Cole and took his hand. Her fingers were warm now, sticky with egg. She looked up at him with an expression that was too old and too steady and too certain for a child who still fed pretend breakfast to a stuffed rabbit. The first X is where Daddy kept his tools, she said. Every man in the room stopped breathing. You know the map? Cole whispered. Mama showed me. At night. When Ray was sleeping, she said someday somebody would come and I'd have to show them the way. Lucy squeezed Cole's hand. She said he'd look like Daddy, but older and sadder. Cole's throat closed, his eyes burned. He squeezed her hand back and didn't trust himself to speak. Outside, the storm had broken. The sky was the color of wet cement and the air smelled like rain-soaked earth and gasoline. 5 motorcycles sat in Darlene's gravel driveway, chrome still beaded with water, engines cold but waiting. Somewhere across Missouri, Roach was reading a text message and doing his own math. Somewhere in the dark architecture of a criminal network that was supposed to be dismantled and dead, phones were ringing. Orders were being given. Resources were being mobilized to find a little girl with a backpack and a one-eared rabbit who knew too much about a dead man's secrets. And somewhere, in a place none of them could see yet, at the end of a map drawn on the back of a placemat in blue ink by a hand that shook with the weight of everything it was about to leave behind, the truth was waiting. The question was no longer whether they would find it. The question was whether they would survive it. Cole lifted Lucy onto the back of his motorcycle and felt her small arms wrap around his waist. She pressed her face against his back, right between the shoulder blades, and held on. Ready? He said. Ready? She said. He kicked the engine to life. The sound tore through the morning like a declaration of war, and they rode. The garage on County Road 14 looked like something the earth was trying to swallow. Tin roof caved in on the left side. Concrete block walls stained with rust and mildew. A roll-up door frozen halfway open. The track bent at an angle that said someone had tried to force it shut years ago and gave up. Weeds grew through the cracks in the gravel lot. Tall, pale, winter-dead stalks that rattled in the wind like bones shaking hands. A faded hand-painted sign above the door read, Mercer Custom Works, but the last 2 letters had been eaten by weather, leaving it as Mercer Custom War, which felt accidentally honest. Ghost's work had never been finished. Not on bikes, not on anything. Cole killed his engine 50 yards out, and the others followed. 5 Harleys ticking in the cold morning air, cooling metal popping like knuckles cracking. The silence after engines die is always louder than the engines themselves. It fills the space with everything the noise was covering: wind, breathing, the distant complaint of crows in a dead oak tree, the sound of 5 men realizing they're about to open a door that's been closed for 6 years. Lucy climbed down from the back of Cole's bike. She stood in the gravel and looked at the garage the way you look at a room you remember from a dream, not quite recognizing it, but feeling it. Her hand found Cole's without looking. "This is it," she said. "Mama brought me here once. At night. We didn't go inside." "Why not?" Cole asked. "She was scared." "Of what?" Lucy looked at the garage. Her fingers tightened. "Of what Daddy left." Hatchet checked the perimeter while Deacon held position at the road. Briggs and Fuel flanked the roll-up door. Cole walked Lucy to a low concrete wall 20 feet from the entrance and sat her down. "Stay here. Don't move. If you hear anything that scares you, get behind that wall and stay flat." "Like hide and seek?" "Yeah, like that. I'm good at hide and seek. Ray never found me." Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't ask what she was hiding from. He didn't need to. Hatchet came back from the tree line. Clear, no tire tracks, no footprints. Nobody's been out here in months, maybe longer. "Or they came and left no trace," Deacon said from the road, his prosthetic hand resting on the handlebar of his bike. "Which is worse." They ducked under the frozen roll-up door one at a time. Inside smelled like motor oil and rust and mouse droppings, and the particular staleness of air that hasn't moved in years. Workbenches along both walls, tools still hanging from pegboards, wrenches, socket sets, a ball-peen hammer with a cracked wooden handle, a hydraulic lift in the center of the floor with nothing on it, shelves lined with coffee cans full of bolts and washers and the accumulated small metal of a life spent building things. Ghost's life, frozen in place. A museum nobody had curated and nobody had visited. Briggs moved through the space like a man walking through his own memory. He touched the workbench with both hands, palms flat, fingers spread. "He stood right here," he said. "Right here. Working on the tank. I sat on that stool and drank beer and told him the lightning bolt looked crooked. He threw a rag at my head." "Briggs," Hatchet said. "Focus." "I am focused. I'm focused on the fact that my best friend spent his last free days in this room, and I didn't know he had a daughter. I didn't know he had a woman. I didn't know he was scared enough to draw a map on the back of a placemat and hand it to a child." Briggs's voice cracked. Not dramatically, just a small structural failure at the seams. "What else didn't I know?" Nobody answered, because nobody could. Fuel found the first hidden compartment 20 minutes in. A section of the concrete floor near the back wall that sounded different when he stepped on it. Hollow instead of solid. A dull thud instead of a flat report. He dropped to his knees and ran his fingers along the edges until he found a seam disguised as a crack. It took Briggs's weight on a pry bar to lift the slab, and underneath was a steel ammunition box sealed with a combination lock. "Anybody know the combo?" Fuel asked. "Try his service number," Deacon said. Ghost was Army, 82nd Airborne. His DD-214 would have... "I don't have his DD-214. "Try 0817, Briggs said quietly. "August 17th, the day he bought the bike." Fuel dialed. The lock opened with a click that sounded final, the click of a door that only opens in one direction. Inside the box were 3 things. A leather-bound journal, the kind with unlined pages, filled cover to cover with Ghost's tight, slanted handwriting. Numbers, names, dates, account routing information. Corporate shell structures diagrammed in blue ink with arrows connecting entities that shouldn't have been connected. The handwriting grew more erratic toward the back of the journal, the letters getting larger, the pressure on the pen heavier, as if the information itself was becoming harder to hold. A USB drive sealed inside a waterproof bag. And a photograph. This one was different from the photo Lucy carried. This one showed a woman. Mid-20s, dark hair, sharp features, unsmiling but not unhappy. She stood on the porch of a small house with her arms crossed and her head tilted slightly, the way people tilt their heads when they're listening to something only they can hear. On the back, in Ghost's handwriting, Elena, the only good thing. "That's the mother," Cole said. "Elena Mercer," Hatchet said, turning the photo over. "Did Lucy ever mention that name?" She just says, Mama. Briggs took the journal and started reading. His lips moved as his eyes tracked the pages, an old habit from a man who'd never fully trusted his own reading speed. The color drained from his face within the first 5 pages. By page 20, his hands were shaking. He names them, Briggs said. All of them. The laundering pipeline. 14 businesses funneling cash through 3 motorcycle clubs and into a holding company called Meridian Ventures. Ghost traced every dollar, every handshake, every wire transfer. Who's at the top? Hatchet asked. Briggs turned pages. Stopped. Read. Read again. Then looked up at Hatchet with an expression Cole had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not fear, but the particular devastation of a man who has just learned that the ground he's been standing on was never solid. Briggs, Hatchet said. Who's at the top? Victor Hale. The name hit the room like a concussion grenade. Hatchet took a step backward. Fuel grabbed the edge of the workbench. Deacon, who was still posted at the door, turned his head sharply enough that the tendons in his neck stood out like cables. That's not possible, Fuel said. Page 43, Briggs said. Read it yourself. Victor Hale, 61 years old, real estate developer, philanthropist. The man who donated $200,000 to build a veterans recreation center in Poplar Bluff. The man who'd personally attended Ghost's memorial service and shaken hands with every grieving biker in the room. The man who'd looked Cole in the eye that day and said, "This world lost a good one." Victor Hale was Meridian Ventures. Victor Hale was the top of the pipeline. Victor Hale had been laundering millions through biker organizations while simultaneously positioning himself as their greatest civilian ally. He was at the funeral, Hatchet said. His voice was barely audible. He stood in the front row. He brought flowers. He stopped, swallowed. He was there to make sure it worked. The fire, the dental records, the story. He was there to watch us grieve and make sure nobody asked questions. And Roach, Cole said. Everyone looked at him. Roach introduced Ghost to Victor Hale 2 years before the fire. I remember because Ghost didn't trust civilians and Roach spent 3 weeks convincing him that Hale was different, that Hale cared about the community, that Hale wanted to help. You're saying Roach set Ghost up. I'm saying Roach opened the door. Whether he knew what was behind it, that's what we need to find out. Fuel paced the length of the garage and back. His boots crunched on concrete dust and dead leaves. This is insane. You're talking about Victor Hale. The man has buildings named after him. He has a foundation. He has a 14-business laundering operation documented page by page by a dead man who isn't dead, Hatchet said. That's what he has. We don't know Ghost isn't dead. We don't know he is either. We never did. We just accepted it because the alternative was too hard. Fuel stopped pacing. He stood in the center of the garage with his fists at his sides and his jaw working, and the look of a man who's watching the frame of his world bend and can't figure out where to push to straighten it. Cole opened the journal to the last pages. Ghost's handwriting here was different. Not just erratic, but urgent. The pen strokes deep enough to gouge the paper. Sentences were underlined twice, 3 times. Marginal notes crowded the edges like thoughts that couldn't fit inside the lines. One passage stopped Cole's breath. They know. R confirmed. Warehouse meeting is a setup. If I go, I don't come back. If I don't go, they come for E and the baby. No choice. Going in. Built the exit. 3 points. The garage. The bridge. The bunker. Everything's there. If I don't make it out, someone will find this. Someone will come for Lucy. If you're reading this, whoever you are, she's all that matters. Get her out. Burn the rest. R confirmed, Hatchet read over Cole's shoulder. His voice was flat. Dead. The voice of a man who's just had a suspicion carved into certainty. R. Roach. We don't... Fuel started. Don't. Hatchet turned on him with a fury that was all the more terrifying for its quietness. Don't tell me we don't know. He wrote it. In his own hand. The night he knew he was walking into a trap. R confirmed. Roach confirmed the setup. Roach told whoever was running the operation that Ghost was coming. That could be anyone with an R name. Name one. Name one person in Ghost Circle whose name starts with R besides Roach. I'll wait. Fuel couldn't. The silence in the garage was absolute. 5 men standing in a dead man's workshop, holding a dead man's journal, reading a dead man's final words, and realizing that the brotherhood they'd trusted with their lives had been breached from the inside. That one of their own, a man they'd ridden with, fought beside, mourned with, had sold ghosts to the wolves, and then stood at his memorial and wept with the rest of them. Cole closed the journal. He looked at the photo of Elena. Then he walked outside to where Lucy sat on the concrete wall, the rabbit in her lap, her legs swinging over the edge. "Lucy, do you know the second place on the map?" She nodded. "The bridge. Can you tell me about it?" "Mama took me there too. She showed me where to look under the boards. She said there was a box. Like a treasure chest, but not fun." "Did you ever see what was inside?" "No. Mama said only open it when the right people come." She looked at Cole. "Are you the right people?" Cole crouched in front of her. His knee popped. His shoulder ached. His eyes felt like they'd been scrubbed with sand. He'd been awake for 26 hours, and every one of them was sitting on his spine like a stack of bricks. "I'm trying to be," he said. Hatchet's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, read the screen, and his face changed. Not shock. Something past shock. Something that had gone all the way through shock and come out the other side into a cold, mechanical clarity. "Roach just posted to the club page," Hatchet said. "He's organizing a memorial ride for Ghost. This Saturday. Wants everyone to meet at the old rally point outside Kennett." "Kennett," Deacon said. "That's 5 miles from the warehouse." "He wants us gathered in one place," Cole said. "He wants to know who's missing," Hatchet corrected. "If we don't show up, he knows something's wrong. If we do show up, he can get a head count and figure out who's been talking." "Or it's a trap," Deacon said. "Or he genuinely wants to honor Ghost and we're all losing our minds," Fuel said. But his voice had lost its conviction. He said it the way people defend a position they've already abandoned, out of loyalty to the argument, not belief in the answer. They loaded the journal, the USB drive, and the photo into Briggs's saddlebag. Cole went back to the floor compartment and checked for anything they'd missed. His fingers found a groove along the inner edge of the steel box. A false bottom. He pried it up with his pocket knife. Underneath was a single sheet of paper, folded once. Ghost's handwriting. It was a letter. "Lucy, you won't read this for a long time, maybe never. But if you're reading it, then somebody found you, which means I did something right, even though I did everything else wrong. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose the fight instead of you. Your mama will tell you I was brave. Don't believe her. I was scared every day. Of them. Of failing. Of what happens to you if I lose. Being scared isn't brave. Doing the thing anyway because a little girl with your mama's eyes deserves a world that isn't run by men like Victor Hale. That's the only part that might be brave. Maybe. There are 3 places. The garage has the proof. The bridge has the tools. The bunker has the rest. If you follow the map all the way through, you'll find what I spent 2 years building. It's enough to bring them down. All of them. But listen to me, Lucy. If it's too dangerous, if the men who come for you say it's too much, then burn it all. Burn the journal. Burn the drives. Burn the map. None of it is worth your life. None of it. Not justice, not revenge, not my legacy. You are the legacy. You. Only you. I love you more than engines and highways and the sound the wind makes at 90 miles an hour on an empty road. That's the most I know how to say. Daddy Cole read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his inside pocket, against his chest, where it lay flat against his heartbeat, like a second pulse. He wasn't going to show it to Lucy. Not yet. She was 6. She'd eaten half a granola bar for dinner and fed pretend eggs to a stuffed rabbit for breakfast. The letter would keep. It would wait until she was old enough to hold the weight of it without breaking. But he was going to keep it. He was going to keep it the way Ghost asked. Close, safe, waiting. They rode south. The bridge on Route 142 was exactly where Fuel remembered it. A narrow 2-lane span over a creek that was running high and muddy from the storm. The missing railing on the east side matched the map. Cole parked on the shoulder and Lucy walked to the bridge's edge with the certainty of a child retracing a path she'd memorized in the dark. "Here," she said, pointing to a specific plank near the fourth post. "Mama said under here." Briggs pried the board up. Underneath, bolted to the bridge's steel frame, was a waterproof case the size of a tackle box. Military surplus, locked with a padlock that yielded to the same August 17th combination. Inside were 4 prepaid cell phones, still sealed in plastic. 3 sets of fake identification documents, driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, insurance cards, and names that didn't exist for people who might need to become someone else in a hurry. A stack of cash in rubber-banded bundles, and a set of keys on a ring with no label, no tag, no indication of what they opened. Ghost hadn't just built an escape route. He'd built a survival kit. A complete disappearing act packed into a waterproof box and bolted to the underside of a bridge in the middle of nowhere. This was the work of a man who had studied what it takes to erase yourself, and had done the homework with the same precision he'd used to paint lightning on a gas tank. "The third X," Cole said. "The bunker. That's where the rest is." Lucy traced the map with her finger. The third mark sat at the intersection of 2 lines that didn't correspond to any road Cole recognized. But the landmarks were clear: a water tower, a creek fork, and the notation 12 steps north from the dead elm. "This is past Doniphan," Fuel said, studying the map over Cole's shoulder. "Deep country, no paved roads past the creek. We'd have to go in on foot for the last mile. Then we go on foot." "Cole," Hatchet pulled him aside. The older man's tremor was worse now, both hands shaking visibly, the scar on his face white against his wind-chapped skin. "We're carrying a journal that names one of the most powerful men in the state. We've got fake IDs and cash that prove Ghost planned to disappear. We've got a 6-year-old girl who 3 separate vehicles came looking for last night, and we haven't slept." "Your point?" "My point is that we're 5 men and a child against a criminal operation that had the resources to stage a death, plant dental records, and hide a 14-business laundering network for 6 years. We need help." "From who? The police? The same county sheriff's department that signed off on Ghost's death certificate without recovering a body?" Hatchet's jaw tightened. "A TF? FBI? The same federal agencies that investigated the warehouse fire and closed the case in 3 weeks? Then what?" "Then we do what Ghost wanted. We follow the map. We get what's in the bunker, and we put it somewhere that Victor Hale and every dirty cop and every paid-off investigator in this state can't touch." Hatchet looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded. Not agreement. Surrender to the only option that was left. They were 40 minutes south of the bridge when Deacon, riding rear position, flashed his lights twice. Cole checked his mirror. Deacon was pointing behind them. 3 vehicles had appeared on the highway a half-mile back. Black. Moving in formation. The same formation from the diner. "They found us," Fuel said through the wind. Cole looked at Lucy's arms around his waist, felt her face pressed between his shoulder blades, felt the weight of Ghost's letter against his chest, and the weight of everything it meant pressing down on him like gravity had doubled. He accelerated. The others followed. 5 Harleys opened up on a 2-lane highway in the Ozark foothills with 3 black SUVs gaining behind them, and a dead man's secret strapped to their bikes, and a 6-year-old girl holding on to a stranger because every other option in her life had let go first. The SUVs were faster. Of course they were. 4 wheels, modern suspension, engines designed for pursuit. The Harleys had weight and noise and the particular stubbornness of machines built for the open road, not escape. Deacon peeled off first. He dropped back, slowing deliberately, angling his bike across the lane to force the lead SUV to brake or commit to running him down. Cole saw it in the mirror. The big Army vet sitting upright on his Harley with his prosthetic hand gripping the throttle, facing down a 2-ton vehicle with nothing but chrome and conviction. The SUV swerved. Deacon held his line. For 3 seconds, the gap between them shrank to nothing, metal and metal in the thin membrane of a decision. And then the SUV jerked left onto the shoulder, spraying gravel, and Deacon gunned his engine and disappeared down a side road. 1 SUV followed him, 2 left. Briggs took the next turn, a logging road that cut west into timber country. He was the biggest target, the most visible, and he drew the second SUV like a matador draws a bull. The SUV followed. Its tires screamed on the wet clay. 1 left. But the last SUV was the fastest, and it wasn't falling for decoys. It locked onto Cole, onto Lucy, onto the backpack that held the map and the journal, and 6 years of buried truth. The highway narrowed as it climbed into the hills. Cole's engine screamed through the curves, the rear tire sliding on wet asphalt. Lucy's arms so tight around his waist he could feel her heartbeat through his back. Hatchet rode beside him. Fuel rode behind. The SUV gained on every straight and lost ground on every curve. And the math was simple and terrible. Eventually the road would straighten and the curves would end and speed would win over agility. Cole saw the turnoff. A dirt road. Unmarked. Dropping sharply into a hollow choked with trees and fog. He didn't signal. He just leaned. The Harley's frame groaned as he forced it off the asphalt and onto mud, the front tire biting, the rear sliding, Lucy's grip shifting but holding. Hatchet and Fuel followed. The SUV tried. Its brakes locked. It slid past the turnoff, tires shrieking, and by the time it reversed, the 3 Harleys were deep in the tree cover, engines rumbling low, mud spraying behind them like brown curtains closing on a stage. They rode for 20 minutes on roads that weren't roads, logging cuts and creek crossings and deer trails that barely fit the bikes. Cole's arms burned. His knee was screaming. Lucy hadn't made a sound since the chase began, and her silence was worse than screaming would have been because it meant she was used to this, used to running, used to holding on while the world tried to shake her loose. They stopped in a clearing, cut the engines, sat in the fog and the silence and listened to their own breathing and the distant sound of the SUV circling the main road like a shark that had lost the scent but hadn't lost interest. "They'll set up a perimeter," Hatchet said between breaths. "Block the roads. Wait for us to surface." "How did they find us?" Fuel demanded. "We told no one. Nobody made calls. Nobody—" He stopped. Hatchet's phone. The text to Roach. "Haven't heard anything. Why?" 4 words. Enough to confirm that Hatchet's phone was active. Enough for someone with the right resources to pull a cell tower ping and narrow a location to a 10-mile radius. "Oh no," Hatchet whispered. He pulled out the phone, stared at it. Then he removed the battery with hands that shook so badly it took 3 tries. He set both pieces on the ground and looked at Cole with an expression that contained the full architecture of self-blame. The walls, the roof, the foundation, all of it crumbling. "I led them to us," Hatchet said. "You didn't know." "I should have. I should have pulled the battery before I ever answered Roach. I should have—" "It's done. We deal with what's next." What's next is that they know we're in this area. They know we've been to the garage. They know we're heading south, which means they know about the map, or they know enough to guess. Cole looked at Lucy. She was sitting on the gas tank of his bike, the rabbit in one hand, the backpack in the other. Fog curled around her like the hollow itself was trying to hide her. "The bunker," Cole said. "We go now. On foot. We leave the bikes. We take what we can carry, and we move through the woods. Lucy knows the landmarks." "Cole, she's 6. She's been navigating this map longer than any of us. Her mother trained her. Ghost trained her mother. This is what they prepared for." Hatchet looked at the girl sitting on the motorcycle in the fog. 6 years old, 40 pounds, holding a one-eared rabbit and the last secrets of a dead man's war. "Then let's move," Hatchet said, "because in about 30 minutes, this hollow is going to be crawling with people who want that backpack more than they want us alive." Cole lifted Lucy off the bike. She stood in the mud and looked up at him. "The dead elm," she said. "It's past the water tower, by the creek where the water splits in 2, 12 steps north. That's where Daddy put the door." "You remember all that?" "Mama made me say it every night, like a bedtime story, but not the fun kind." Cole took her hand. Hatchet checked the tree line. Fuel stashed the bikes under fallen branches, covering chrome with leaves and mud. They walked into the woods, 3 men, a child, and the accumulated weight of a dead man's fight pressing down on every step. Behind them, on the road they'd left, the sound of engines grew louder. Not motorcycles, not the SUV, something heavier. Multiple vehicles, the low diesel growl of trucks that carry equipment and personnel, and the particular mechanical patience of people who have been paid enough to wait as long as it takes. Hatchet heard it, Fuel heard it, Cole heard it, Lucy heard it too. She didn't flinch. She just squeezed Cole's hand tighter and walked faster, her small sneakers sinking into the mud, her eyes locked forward on a path only she could see. The hunted leading the hunter's hunters through a forest that smelled like wet pine and rotting leaves, and the slow, cold certainty that whatever was in that bunker had better be worth every drop of blood it was about to cost. The dead elm stood like a crooked finger pointing at nothing. Bark stripped gray and smooth by years of weather, branches bare and black against the low fog, roots erupting from the earth in knotted fists that had been gripping the same dirt since before any of them were born. The creek split 20 yards south, one fork running clear and fast over limestone, the other curling west into a marshy depression choked with cattails and standing water. The water tower rose behind the tree line to the east, its rusted legs visible through gaps in the pine canopy, the tank itself long empty, paint peeled down to bare metal that had turned the color of dried blood. Lucy counted the steps. She walked north from the base of the elm with the deliberate precision of a child performing a ritual, heel to toe, each step measured, lips moving silently as she counted. Cole walked beside her but didn't touch her. This was her part. This was the piece her mother had rehearsed with her in dark rooms while a man named Ray slept, and the world outside didn't know or didn't care that a 6-year-old was memorizing coordinates to a dead man's bunker. 12, Lucy said. She stopped, looked down at her feet. The ground beneath her was flat, covered in dead leaves and a thin layer of mud. Nothing visible. Nothing that said, here, look here, dig here. It's under, she said. Mama said push the rock. Cole scanned the ground. Hatchet and Fuel spread out, kicking through leaves and debris. It was Fuel who found it, a flat stone the size of a hubcap, set flush with the earth, almost invisible unless you knew to look. He rolled it aside, and beneath it was a steel plate with a recessed handle and a keyhole. The keys from the bridge. Cole tried the first key. Nothing. Second key. The lock turned with a mechanical thunk that vibrated through the steel and into the ground beneath their feet, like the earth itself was unlocking. He pulled the handle. The plate lifted on hidden hinges, revealing a concrete staircase descending into darkness. The air that came up was cold and dry and smelled like sealed plastic and gun oil and the particular absence of living things. I'll go first, Hatchet said. No. Cole looked at Lucy. She goes first. This is her father's house. She walks in first. Hatchet opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because Cole was right, and they both knew it. Lucy looked at the dark staircase. She held the rabbit tight against her chest. Then she reached up and took Cole's hand. Together, she said. They went down. 12 steps. Concrete walls. A motion sensor light clicked on at the bottom. Battery-powered, still functional after 6 years, which meant Ghost had installed industrial-grade equipment meant to outlast him. The space opened into a room roughly 20 feet by 30, concrete floor, concrete ceiling, shelving units along the walls, a desk, a chair, a cot with a folded blanket, a water jug, empty, a camping stove, unused. Ghost had built himself a tomb he could live in. The shelves held the arsenal, not weapons, though there were 2 locked cases that probably contained firearms. The real arsenal was information. Hard drives, USB drives, memory cards, printed documents in sealed plastic sleeves, organized with tabs and labels in Ghost's precise handwriting. Surveillance photographs, men in suits, men in biker cuts, men shaking hands outside office buildings, and warehouse doors and the kind of restaurants where the tables are far apart and the music is loud enough to cover conversation, and recordings. Dozens of small digital recorders, each labeled with a date and a code. Ghost had wired himself. For months, maybe years. He'd walked into rooms with killers and money launderers and corrupt officials and recorded every word while smiling and shaking hands and pretending to be one of them. He was building a case, Fuel whispered. A federal case. By himself. Because he didn't trust the feds to build it, Cole said. Because the last time someone went to the feds with evidence against the syndicate, the witness disappeared and the agent got transferred and the case file went into a shredder. Hatchet picked up one of the sealed document sleeves. Inside was a photograph of Victor Hale standing beside a man in a sheriff's department uniform. They were at a fundraiser, smiling, Hale's arm around the deputy's shoulders. "That's the county sheriff," Hatchett said. "Tom Eckerd. He signed Ghost's death certificate." "I know." He signed a death certificate for a man whose body was never found, at the request of a man who was laundering millions through the same organizations Ghost was trying to expose. "I know, Hatch." "So when you said we can't go to the police, I meant we can't go to the police." Fuel sat down on the cot. The springs creaked. He stared at the wall. Ghost spent 2 years building this, 2 years undercover inside his own life, recording, documenting, setting up safe houses and escape routes, and he stopped. His voice had gone thick. And he did it alone. He didn't tell any of us, not Briggs, not me, not you. He looked at Hatchett. "Why?" "Because he didn't know who to trust," Cole said. "He could have trusted us." "Could he?" "Roach rode with all of us. Roach was in our meetings, our bars, our campsites. If Ghost told any one of us, Roach would have known within a week, and Ghost would have been dead within 2. The words sat in the room like a body nobody wanted to identify. Dead. Ghost had faced that word as a mathematical certainty and had chosen to erase himself rather than let it become literal. He'd given up his name, his brotherhood, his daughter, everything, because the alternative was a real grave instead of a fake one. Lucy had walked to the desk. She stood on tiptoe and pulled open the top drawer. Inside was a music box. Small, wooden, the finish worn to a soft glow. She opened it. A melody played, Mashu, thin and metallic and impossibly delicate in the concrete silence of the bunker. A simple tune, the kind of melody that exists in the space between lullaby and elegy. "Mama sang this," Lucy said, "every night." Cole watched her stand there, holding the music box, the melody filling the underground room like water filling a glass, and he understood something that Ghost's journal and letters and evidence hadn't quite made real until this exact moment. Ghost hadn't just been fighting a criminal organization. He'd been fighting time, racing against the moment when the walls would close and the options would narrow to a single point, and every ounce of love he had for his daughter would have to be compressed into things. A music box, a letter, a map on a placemat, because he wouldn't be there to hold her himself. The melody wound down. The music box clicked shut. The silence returned, heavier than before. Hatchett's hands had stopped shaking. Cole noticed it the way you notice a clock that stopped ticking. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of something you'd gotten used to. Hatchett's fingers were steady on the document sleeve, his jaw set, his eyes clear. "We take everything," Hatchett said. "Every drive, every recording, every photograph. We load it onto the bikes, and we get it to someone who can't be bought." "Who?" Fuel asked. "I know a reporter," Cole said. "Kansas City. She did the series on the methamphetamine pipeline through the boot heel 3 years ago. Independent. Doesn't work for any outlet that Hale's money touches." "A reporter." "A reporter with federal contacts who aren't Hale's federal contacts. Ghost couldn't go to the law because the law was compromised, but he could go to the press. He could flood the zone with enough evidence that the story gets too big for any single person to bury. That's a gamble. Everything's been a gamble since last night. At least this one has a chance." They loaded the material into backpacks. Every drive, every recorder, every document. Lucy carried the music box in her backpack next to the map and the photograph of her father. Cole carried the journal and Ghost's letter and the weight of a dead man's faith that someone would finish what he started. They climbed out of the bunker. The fog had thinned, but the sky was still low and gray, pressing down on the trees like a hand on a chest. Cole pulled the steel plate shut and rolled the stone back over it. They were halfway back to the bikes when Fuel stopped. He held up one hand. Everyone froze. Lucy pressed against Cole's leg. The rabbit disappeared inside the oversized jacket. Voices. Distant but approaching. Multiple. Coming from the direction of the road. Then engines. Not car engines. Motorcycle engines. 2, maybe 3. Coming up the logging trail toward the hollow where they'd stashed the Harleys. "That's not Deacon," Hatchett said. That's not Briggs." "How do you know?" Because Deacon rides a softail with an aftermarket exhaust that sounds like a diesel with a grudge. And Briggs's transmission winds in third gear. I've been listening to those bikes for 15 years. Those aren't them. Cole pulled Lucy behind a fallen log. Hatchet crouched beside a pine trunk. Fuel dropped flat behind a rise in the terrain, his eyes locked on the trail below. 3 motorcycles emerged from the tree line. They rolled into the hollow where the stashed Harleys sat beneath branches and mud, and the lead rider killed his engine and dismounted. He was lean, maybe 45, with a face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts left over from better faces. A crooked nose, a shallow chin, eyes set too close together. He wore a cut Cole didn't recognize, no club name visible, but the snake and 8 tattoo on his neck was visible even from 50 yards. Consortium. The other 2 riders flanked the hidden Harleys. One of them pulled branches away, revealing chrome. He photographed the plates with his phone. "Got him," the lead rider said. He had a radio clipped to his vest. He keyed it. 3 bikes, stashed in the hollow off the logging cut south of the water tower. 2 more unaccounted. Running the plates now. The radio crackled. A voice came back. Calm, educated, the kind of voice that belonged in a boardroom. "Hold position. The advance team is 20 minutes out. Do not engage. I want the girl alive and the material intact. Everything else is disposable." Cole felt Lucy's hand tighten on his arm. She'd heard it. She'd heard herself reduced to a commodity. The girl, alive, intact, and the rest of them dismissed as collateral. Disposable. The word hung in the cold air between them like a sentence that had already been carried out. "We can't go back to the bikes," Fuel whispered. "We don't need to," Cole said. "We need to move. North. Through the woods. Put distance between us and that hollow." "And go where?" "We're in the middle of nowhere with no vehicles, no phone signal, and a child." "The water tower. There's a service road that runs to it. County maintenance, paved. If we can reach it." Hatchet grabbed Cole's arm. His grip was iron. "They said 20 minutes. Advance team. That means they're staging somewhere close. If we hit a road, they'll have it blocked." "Then we don't hit the road. We follow it through the trees and come out past the checkpoint." "With a 6-year-old?" Cole looked down at Lucy. She looked back up at him. Her face was dirty. Her shoes were soaked through. The oversized jacket hung past her knees, but her eyes were steady. "I can walk," she said. "I'm fast." "I know you are. I beat everyone at school in running, even the big kids." "Then stay close to me and run when I run." They moved north, single file. Hatchet on point, then Cole and Lucy, then Fuel covering the rear. The forest was dense enough to hide them, but sparse enough that every snapped branch sounded like a gunshot. Lucy moved with a silence that was unsettling. No stumbling, no complaints, no sound at all except the faint whisper of her wet sneakers on pine needles. She'd learned to move quietly, the way hunted things learn, the way her father must have moved through the last months of his visible life. They'd covered maybe a quarter mile when Cole heard it. A voice. Behind them, shouting. Then the radio crackle of the consortium riders relaying position. "They found our tracks," Fuel said. "Run," Cole said. He picked Lucy up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and locked her legs around his waist and pressed her face into his shoulder. The rabbit bounced against his collarbone. He ran. Branches whipped his face. Roots tried to take his feet. His knee screamed with every stride, a bright electric pain that shot from the joint to the hip and back. Hatchet was ahead of him, crashing through underbrush. Fuel was behind, breathing hard, heavy boots churning mud. They broke through a thicket and hit the service road. Paved. Empty. Stretching north and south through the trees like a gray ribbon laid on green cloth. And there, parked on the shoulder 200 yards north, was a truck. A beat-up Chevy flatbed with a dented fender and a toolbox in the bed, and the particular look of a vehicle that had been working these roads longer than the roads had been paved. "County maintenance," Hatchet said. "Keys," Fuel said. They ran to it. The cab was unlocked. No keys in the ignition. Fuel dropped beneath the steering column. His fingers found wires. 20 seconds. 30. The engine coughed, caught, rumbled to life with a sound like an old dog waking up. Cole threw open the passenger door and put Lucy inside. She scrambled to the middle of the bench seat. Cole climbed in beside her. Hatchet took the far window. Fuel put the truck in gear and they lurched forward, tires biting gravel, the flatbed rattling like it was trying to shake itself apart. Behind them, voices, engines, the sound of pursuit reorganizing. Fuel drove like the road was personal. He pushed the truck through curves it wasn't built for, the chassis groaning, the steering pulling left on every turn. The service road met a county highway after 3 miles, and Fuel took the turn without stopping, the rear end swinging wide, tires screaming. "Phone," Cole said. "Anybody got signal?" Hatchet checked. 1 bar, flickering. "Give it to me." Cole dialed the number from memory. A reporter named Janine Calloway. He'd met her 5 years ago when she'd come to a club event researching a story. She'd been sharp, fearless, and completely uninterested in writing the kind of story that powerful people wanted told. She'd also been threatened twice during the methamphetamine series and hadn't flinched. The phone rang 3 times. "Calloway. This is Cole Maddox, Iron Saints." Silence. Then, "It's been a while, Cole. I need a meet. Today. Now. I have material that's going to blow the roof off the boot heel and about half the businesses between here and Kansas City." "What kind of material?" "Recordings, documents, surveillance photos. Financial records connecting Victor Hale to a 14-business laundering operation run through motorcycle clubs." The silence that followed was different. The silence of a reporter hearing a name she recognized attached to a story she hadn't imagined. Victor Hale, the philanthropist. The same. "Cole, that's a—" "I know what it is. I also have a 6-year-old girl in the car with me who's being hunted by the same people Hale pays to keep his secrets buried. We're driving north on Highway 21 in a stolen county maintenance truck with an armed pursuit behind us. I need a place to bring this material that isn't compromised. Not police, not feds. Somewhere clean." "How much material?" "Enough to fill a courtroom for 6 months." "Where are you exactly?" 30 miles south of Van Buren, moving north. "There's a motel on Highway 60 west of Poplar Bluff, the Starlight. It's a dump, but it's cash only, and the owner doesn't ask questions. I can be there in 3 hours. We'll be there in 2. He hung up, handed the phone back to Hatchet. "Who's Calloway?" Hatchet asked. "Our exit strategy." They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Lucy fell asleep between them, her head against Cole's arm, the rabbit against her chest, the backpack wedged between her feet. Cole watched her breathe and thought about Ghost building that bunker, Ghost sealing those drives, Ghost writing that letter with hands that knew they were writing goodbye. The architecture of a father's love expressed entirely through preparation for his own absence. Fuel saw them first. Cole, 2 black SUVs, parked on the shoulder a mile ahead, facing them, not moving, just waiting. "They blocked the highway," Hatchet said. "Can we turn around?" Fuel checked the mirror. 2 more behind us, maybe a mile back. They boxed us. Cole looked at the highway. The SUVs ahead. The SUVs behind. The tree line on both sides. The stolen truck with its rattling flatbed and its pulling steering and its engine that sounded like it was running on stubbornness and fumes. "There," he said. He pointed to a gravel road branching east. A sign read Ozark Ironworks, private property. Below it, in smaller letters, closed. "A steel mill?" Fuel said. "An abandoned steel mill, with buildings, cover, walls. Better than open highway. Cole, drive." Fuel took the turn. The gravel road climbed for half a mile through scrub oak and red cedar, then opened onto a compound that looked like the skeleton of an industrial age that had died and nobody had bothered to bury. 3 main buildings, a smelting hall with a collapsed roof section, a loading dock running the length of the west wall, and an administrative building with boarded windows and a chimney that had cracked down the middle like a broken tooth. Rusted rail tracks ran between the structures, embedded in concrete that had buckled and split. Equipment sat in the yard. A crane with a dangling hook, a forklift tipped on its side, stacks of steel I-beams furred with orange rust. Fuel parked the truck behind the smelting hall, out of sight from the gravel road. They got out. The wind had picked up, cold and raw, carrying the smell of rust and old concrete and the particular emptiness of places where men used to work, and now nothing moves except weather. Lucy woke when Cole lifted her from the cab. She looked at the steel mill with wide eyes. "It's loud," she said. "That's just the wind." "No, the building. It's talking." She was right. The smelting hall groaned and popped in the wind. Steel expanding and contracting, loose panels flapping, the structural complaints of a building slowly losing its argument with gravity. Cole carried her inside. The hall was enormous. A cathedral of rust and shadow, the ceiling 40 feet up where it still existed, open to the sky where it didn't. Old furnaces lined one wall, cold and dark, their mouths gaping like the faces of things that had been fed for decades and then suddenly starved. The floor was concrete, cracked, pooled with rainwater from the collapsed sections. Loading bay doors along the far wall stood open, revealing the dock and beyond it, the tree line and the gray sky. "Hatch, take position at the east entrance. Fuel, west side. I'll stay with Lucy in the center." "And when they come?" Fuel asked. "We hold until Calloway gets here." "With what? Strong language?" Cole reached into Briggs's saddlebag, which Briggs had strapped to his own back before peeling off as a decoy. He'd left it. Deliberate. Inside, beneath the journal and the drives, were two things that hadn't been visible before: a compact .38 revolver and a box of ammunition. Ghosts. From the bunker. Briggs had packed them without saying a word. Cole checked the cylinder. Loaded. He handed the .38 to Hatchet and pulled his own piece. A Colt. .45 he'd carried in his saddlebag for 11 years and fired exactly twice, both times at coyotes threatening a ranch dog outside Springfield. "2 guns," Fuel said, "against however many they're sending." "2 guns in a building full of steel," Cole said, "and 3 men who aren't leaving without that girl." Fuel stared at him. Then he picked up a length of steel rebar from the floor, 4 feet long, heavy, rust flaking off it like dry skin. He weighed it in his hands. 4 feet of iron counts for something, he said. They waited. It didn't take long. The first SUV came up the gravel road at 3:12 in the afternoon. It stopped at the entrance to the compound. Doors opened. 4 men got out. 2 wore tactical vests. 1 carried a rifle slung across his chest. The 4th wore a long coat and no visible weapon, which meant he was either in charge or stupid, and the way the others deferred to him said it wasn't the second option. 2 more SUVs arrived within minutes. 8 more men, some armed visibly, some not. They spread across the compound with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before, clearing sight lines, establishing positions, moving with a calm that was more frightening than aggression, because calm meant confidence, and confidence meant they expected to win. The man in the long coat walked to the center of the yard. He stood between the rusted rail tracks and looked at the smelting hall. "Cole Maddox," he called out. His voice echoed off the steel walls. Educated, controlled, the same voice from the radio. "My name is Marcus Webb. I work for people who would prefer this to end quietly. You have something that belongs to them. We have no interest in you or your friends. Give us the girl and the material, and you ride out of here." Cole stood behind a furnace near the loading bay. Lucy was behind him, tucked into an alcove between 2 rusted equipment cabinets. The rabbit was in her arms. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were enormous. "The girl doesn't belong to anyone," Cole shouted back. "She belongs to her legal guardian, a man named Ray Purcell, who has filed a missing persons report, who is, at this moment, cooperating with the county sheriff's department to recover his stepdaughter from a group of men who abducted her from a public restaurant. Ray Purcell is an abusive piece of garbage who let a child walk out into a thunderstorm without shoes that fit. That's a matter for family court, not for armed men in an abandoned building." "You're right. Let's call it in. Get the county sheriff out here, Tom Eckerd, the one who signed a death certificate for a man who never died." Silence. "Or we could talk about Victor Hale," Cole continued, "and the 14 businesses, and the wire transfers, and the recordings. We've got a lot of recordings, Webb. Your boss should have checked the bunker before he decided Ghost was dead." The silence stretched. Cole could feel it vibrating. The tension of a man recalculating, adjusting, running through options like a dealer shuffling cards. "Mr. Maddox," Webb said finally, "if you have what you say you have, then you understand the scale of what you're dealing with. These are not people who negotiate. These are not people who lose. You are three men in a building that's falling apart, with a child you can't protect and evidence you can't use. The reporter you called will never reach you. The roads are already closed. In 30 minutes, it will be dark. And in the dark, math matters more than courage. Then I guess we've got 30 minutes to change the math. Webb shook his head slowly, then raised one hand. The tactical men began to move. 2 toward the east entrance, 2 toward the west, 2 more circling south to the loading dock, and then a sound. Not from the compound, not from the tree line, from the road, from the gravel, from the highway beyond. Motorcycles, not 1 or 2. Many. The deep, rolling, unmistakable thunder of Harley engines, a sound that starts in the chest and moves outward, that turns air into something you can feel against your skin, that doesn't arrive so much as occupy space like it's always been there and the world was just too quiet to hear it. Headlights appeared at the entrance to the compound. 5. 10. More behind them. Filling the gravel road, engines rumbling low, chrome, catching what was left of the gray afternoon light. Briggs was in front, his face battered, a split lip, dried blood down his chin, a bruise swelling his left eye shut. But he was upright and riding and alive. Beside him was Deacon, his prosthetic hand locked on the throttle, his jaw set like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains behind him. And behind them, bikers Cole didn't recognize. 15. 20. Men and women on machines that had seen more highway than most cars would see in a lifetime. Old riders, young riders, patches from clubs Cole hadn't spoken to in years, road-worn faces and scarred hands, and the quiet, absolute presence of people who had ridden through a storm because someone they trusted had asked them to. Briggs had made calls. Deacon had made calls. In the hours since they'd peeled off as decoys, they'd reached into the network that Ghost had spent years building. Not the criminal network, not the syndicate, but the other one, the real one. The web of riders who remembered Ghost, who owed him, who believed in the thing that motorcycle brotherhood was supposed to mean before men like Victor Hale turned it into a money pipeline. They filled the compound, engines rumbling, headlights blazing, 23 motorcycles forming a wall of chrome and noise between Webb's men and the smelting hall. Webb's team stopped moving. The math had changed. Briggs dismounted and walked toward the smelting hall. Blood dripped from his chin onto his cut. He didn't wipe it. "Got your message," he said to no one in particular. Then he looked at Webb. "You want the girl? Come through us." Webb surveyed the compound. 12 men with weapons, 23 bikers with engines and fury, and the particular immovability of people who had stopped calculating the odds and started calculating the cost of walking away from something that mattered. His phone rang. He answered, listened. His face didn't change, but something behind it did. Some architecture of certainty shifting, some foundation developing a crack. He lowered the phone. "Mr. Maddox." Cole stepped into the loading bay doorway. Lucy was behind him. The entire compound could see her. The small figure in the oversized jacket, the one-eared rabbit, the backpack full of a dead man's war. "You said the roads are closed," Cole called out. "You said the reporter can't get here. You said the math is on your side." He paused. "Check your math again." Webb looked at the bikers, looked at his men, looked at his phone. Then a new set of headlights appeared on the gravel road. Not motorcycles, not SUVs, a car. Compact, dusty, driven fast. It slid to a stop at the edge of the compound and a woman got out. Mid-40s, red hair pulled back, a messenger bag slung across her chest, wearing the kind of determination on her face that suggested she'd driven through at least one roadblock to get here. Janine Calloway. She looked at the bikers, looked at the armed men, looked at the steel mill. Then she pulled a phone from her pocket and held it up. "I've been recording this entire compound for the last 4 minutes via satellite uplink to my editor's server. Every face, every weapon, every vehicle plate. If anything happens to anyone here, anyone, it goes live in 60 seconds. Webb's men looked at each other. The tactical vests suddenly looked less like armor and more like targets. Webb stood very still. The wind cut across the compound, carrying rust and cold and the smell of 23 idling Harley engines. The sky was darkening. The first stars were pushing through the gray. His phone rang again. He answered, listened longer this time. The crack in his certainty widened into something visible, a jaw tightening, a weight settling behind the eyes, the look of a man receiving orders he doesn't want but can't refuse. He lowered the phone. "This isn't over," he said. "No," Cole said. "It's not. But tonight, you leave." Webb looked at Lucy one more time. The girl stared back at him from behind Cole's legs. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She held the rabbit and looked at the man who'd been sent to erase her father's legacy, and in her eyes was something that Webb, for all his education and control and the resources of a criminal empire behind him, could not match. She wasn't afraid. She'd been afraid her whole life. Of Ray. Of the dark. Of the men at her school. Of the sound of her mother not coming home. She'd been afraid so long that fear had become structural, load-bearing, part of the architecture of who she was. But tonight, standing behind a man who'd carried her through a storm, surrounded by the thunder of machines her father had loved, she discovered something fear hadn't prepared her for. She wasn't alone. Webb turned. He walked back to his vehicle. His men followed. One by one, the SUVs backed out of the compound, headlights sweeping across chrome and rust, and the faces of 23 riders who watched them leave with the silence of people who understand that winning a battle doesn't end a war. The engines faded. The gravel settled. The compound went quiet except for wind and idling Harleys and the breathing of men who hadn't exhaled in 20 minutes. Calloway walked to Cole. She looked at the backpack in Lucy's arms. "Is that it?" she asked. "That's part of it. The rest is on the bikes, drives, recordings. Enough paper to build a bonfire or bring down an empire. Your choice." "It's not my choice. It's hers." Calloway looked at Lucy. "Your father collected all this?" Lucy nodded. "He must have been very brave." Lucy considered this. Then she said, with the measured honesty of a child who has learned to weigh words before spending them, "He was scared. He said so in his letter. But he did it anyway." Calloway blinked. Then she crouched down until she was eye level with the girl. "That's what brave means," she said. The night came down around the compound like a curtain being drawn across a stage. Bikers dismounted. Someone produced a camp stove and made coffee. Someone else found blankets in a saddlebag. Briggs sat on an overturned I-beam and let Deacon clean the cut above his eye with a first aid kit held together with duct tape. Hatchet stood at the edge of the compound, smoking a cigarette, watching the road. His hands were steady. Cole sat on the loading dock with Lucy beside him. She'd eaten half a protein bar someone had offered and was now leaning against his arm with the rabbit in her lap and the music box in her hands. She turned the key. The melody played, thin and small and somehow louder than everything else. "Cole?" she said. "Yeah." "The man said it's not over." "He's right. It's not." "What happens next?" Cole looked at the bikers gathered in the yard. Briggs with his battered face, Deacon with his prosthetic hand, Fuel with his rebar leaning against the furnace like a sword he wasn't ready to put down. Hatchet at the perimeter, steady for the first time in years. 20 strangers who'd ridden through a storm for a dead man's daughter. "Next," Cole said, "we tell the truth. Everything your daddy found, everything he recorded. We give it to the reporter and we let the world hear it. And then? Then the people who heard him have to answer for it. And my daddy?" Cole felt the letter against his chest. Ghost's handwriting, ghost's fear, ghost's love compressed into ink and paper, and the desperate hope that someone would come. "We haven't found him yet," Cole said, "but the map had 3 marks. We've been to all 3, which means if your daddy is still out there, he's not at the end of a map. He's at the end of a choice he made 6 years ago." Lucy turned the music box key again. The melody played. "He'll come," she said. "How do you know?" "Because the bad men came for me. And Mama said if the bad men ever come, Daddy comes too. That's the promise." Cole put his arm around her. She was small and warm and impossibly certain. From the road, deep in the darkness beyond the compound, came a sound. A single motorcycle engine, not coming from the direction of the highway, not from the county road, from the south, from the deep country, From the direction of the bunker and the dead elm and the place where a man had buried his last secrets beneath 12 steps of earth, everyone heard it. Every biker in the compound turned toward the sound. Calloway lowered her phone. Hatchet dropped his cigarette. The engine grew louder, closer. A single headlight appeared through the trees, cutting through the dark like a blade, steady, unhurried, approaching with the deliberate pace of someone who has been traveling a very long time and has finally found the road that leads to the last place they need to be. Lucy stood up on the loading dock. The rabbit fell from her lap. She stared into the headlight with an expression that Cole would remember for the rest of his life. Not hope, not joy, not the simple happiness of a child seeing something she wanted. Something older than all of those. Something that existed in the space between a promise made and a promise kept. The motorcycle entered the compound. It rolled slowly between the parked Harleys, between the rusted rail tracks, between the men and women who stood in silence and watched it pass. The rider was lean, hooded, gloves worn through at the fingertips. The bike was stripped down, rebuilt, unrecognizable, except for one thing. On the tank, beneath layers of road grime and years of hard miles, the faintest trace of silver lightning caught the firelight from the camp stove. Lucy's voice was barely a whisper. "Daddy?" The rider killed the engine. The silence was total. He sat on the bike for a long moment, head bowed, hands gripping the bars. Then he reached up and pulled back the hood. Scarred, older, a face that had been taken apart by time and violence and reassembled into something that was still recognizable, but only barely. The way a photograph looks after it's been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. But the chin came to a point, and the eyes, dark, steady, carrying a weight that most men would have set down years ago, found Lucy on the loading dock with the certainty of a compass finding north. Elias Ghost Mercer looked at his daughter for the first time in 6 years. And Lucy ran. She ran the way children run when they don't know the word for what they're feeling, with everything. Arms pumping, sneakers slapping concrete, the oversized jacket flapping behind her like wings that hadn't learned to fly yet. She didn't call out again. She didn't need to. The word she'd already said was still hanging in the air between them, filling the compound like smoke, like engine noise, like something that had been held underwater for 6 years and had finally broken the surface. "Daddy." Ghost swung his leg off the bike. His movements were slow. Not from hesitation, but from the particular economy of a body that had learned to ration every gesture, to make each motion count, because excess movement attracted attention, and attention was a luxury he hadn't been able to afford. He took one step forward, then another. Then his knees hit the concrete and he opened his arms and Lucy crashed into him with the full velocity of 40 pounds in 6 years, and every night she'd spent holding a one-eared rabbit and pretending it was him. He caught her, wrapped his arms around her, pulled her against his chest, and the sound that came out of him was not a word. It was something beneath language, a low, broken exhalation that carried the weight of 2,000 nights spent alone in rooms where he couldn't say his own name, listening to a music box melody in his memory because the real one was in a bunker he couldn't visit, belonging to a daughter he couldn't hold. Lucy pressed her face into his neck. Her small hands gripped the fabric of his jacket. She was shaking, not crying, shaking, the tremors of a body releasing tension it had been carrying so long it had become structural, load-bearing, part of the foundation of who she was. "You came," she said into his collar. "Mama said you'd come." Ghost's hands moved to the back of her head. His fingers, scarred, calloused, trembling, spread across her dark hair and held her the way you hold something you've spent years convincing yourself you'd never touch again. "I'm here," he said. His voice was a wreck, sandpaper and rust and the specific rawness of a throat that hadn't spoken this particular truth out loud in 6 years. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." Cole stood on the loading dock and watched. He didn't move, didn't speak. Around him, 23 bikers stood in the same silence, not the uncomfortable silence of people watching something private, but the reverential silence of people witnessing something they understood in their bones. Every man and woman in that compound had lost something: a marriage, a child, a brother, a version of themselves they couldn't get back. They knew what reunion looked like. They also knew what it cost. Hatchet was the first to move. He walked across the compound toward Ghost, slowly. Not a approach. A pilgrimage. His boots crunched on gravel. His hands hung at his sides, steady now, the tremor gone as if the sight of Ghost holding his daughter had recalibrated something inside him that had been shaking for 6 years. Ghost looked up over Lucy's shoulder. His eyes found Hatchet's face, and something passed between them that was too large for words. Recognition, guilt, gratitude, apology, fury, relief, all of it compressed into a single look that lasted 3 seconds and contained an entire history. "Hatch," Ghost said. "You son of a bitch," Hatchet said. His voice cracked on the last word. He dropped to one knee beside them and put his hand on Ghost's shoulder. His fingers gripped the fabric and didn't let go. "You were alive, this whole time, and you let us grieve. You let us ride that funeral procession. You let us drink ourselves stupid at your memorial while you were out there. I had to. You had to. They had Elena. They had her mother. They had leverage on everyone I'd ever stood next to. If I stayed dead, they stopped looking. If they stopped looking, Lucy was safe." "Was she?" Hatchet's voice went quiet. "Was she safe, Ghost? Because I just spent 24 hours pulling your daughter out of situations that say otherwise." Ghost's face changed. The scars tightened. The muscles beneath them shifted into something that wasn't anger, but was adjacent to it. The look of a man being confronted with the cost of a decision he'd made in the dark, alone, with no one to tell him if he was right. Elena was supposed to... He stopped, swallowed. She had the plan, the map, the safe houses. She knew where everything was. She was supposed to take Lucy and disappear if anything went wrong. But then she met Ray, and Ray... "We know about Ray," Cole said from the dock. Ghost looked at him. The two men had ridden together for 4 years, had shared campsites and silence and the kind of trust that builds between people who face the same direction on the same road. Now they were strangers separated by 6 years of death and resurrection and the impossible distance between a man who grieves and a man who lets himself be grieved for. "Cole?" Ghost said. "Yeah. Thank you." Cole nodded. He didn't say you're welcome. He didn't say it's nothing, because it wasn't nothing. It was everything, and men like Cole acknowledged weight without pretending it was light. Lucy pulled back from Ghost's chest. She studied his face. The scars. The new lines. The years written into his skin like entries in a ledger she couldn't read. She touched the scar that ran along his jaw. A thin white line that hadn't been there in the photograph she carried. "You look different," she said. "I know. You look tired." "I am tired." "Are you done being dead?" Ghost's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. The ghost of a smile, which, given the circumstances, was exactly right. "Yeah, Lucy, I'm done being dead." She reached into the pocket of the oversized jacket and pulled out the stuffed rabbit. She held it up so Ghost could see it. "I kept him safe," she said. "Like you said." Ghost took the rabbit, held it, turned it over in his scarred hands, the missing ear, the matted fur. The years of being squeezed and carried and held against a small chest in dark rooms by a child who needed something to hold on to because her father had chosen to become a memory. "You did good," Ghost whispered. "You did so good, Lucy." Calloway stood at the edge of the group, her messenger bag against her hip, her phone recording. She wasn't performing journalism right now. She was witnessing, and she knew the difference. "Mr. Mercer," she said when the silence had settled enough to hold a new voice, "I'm Janine Calloway. I'm going to tell your story, all of it, but I need to know. Are you willing to go on record?" Ghost stood. He lifted Lucy with him. She clung to his neck, legs wrapped around his torso, unwilling to let go, and faced the reporter. "I've been building the record for 8 years, he said. "Recordings, documents, financials. Everything's in that bunker or on those bikes. I'll give you all of it. But the story doesn't start with me. It starts with the people who built the machine." Victor Hale. Hale is the money. Roach was the inside man. Tom Eckert signed off on the cover-up. There are 14 businesses, 3 shell corporations, and a network of paid officials stretching from here to Jefferson City. I've got recordings of every meeting, every handshake, every dollar that moved through the pipeline. And the warehouse fire? Ghost's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. A door opening onto a room he'd kept locked for 6 years. The fire was real. They said it. I was supposed to be inside. Roach confirmed I'd be there. But I'd already planted the dental records, military surplus, modified, and I went out the back before the accelerant caught. Watched the building burn from a tree line a quarter-mile away. You watched your own funeral, Hatchett said. Not a question. I watched from a ridge on Route 60, 200 bikes. I could hear the engines from a mile away. Ghost's voice was steady, but his eyes were not. They were the eyes of a man who had stood on the outside of his own life and watched the people he loved mourn him, and had to stay silent because the alternative was making the mourning real. That was the hardest day. Not the fire. Not the years after. That ride. Those bikes. Knowing I'd done that to every one of you. You could have told us, Fuel said. He was standing at the edge of the group with the rebar still in his hand, the last man to let go of the weapon, the last man to fully trust the moment. If I'd told one person, Roach would have known within a week. He was in everything, club meetings, group chats, rides. He had access to every conversation and every phone number and every location. The only way to keep Lucy safe was to make the death airtight, and the only way to make it airtight was to make it real for everyone, including you. Fuel looked at the ground, then at the rebar in his hand. He set it down slowly, leaning it against the furnace with a care that said he wasn't discarding a weapon. He was putting down something heavier, the suspicion, the anger, the weight of having doubted Roach and been right and wishing he'd been wrong. So what now? Fuel asked. Now we finish it, Ghost said. Calloway made her calls from the parking lot of the compound with a satellite phone she kept in her car for exactly this kind of situation. The kind where cell towers are unreliable and the story is the kind that powerful people would prefer to stay buried. She called her editor. She called 2 contacts at the state attorney general's office. Not the county level, not the federal level, but the state level, where Hale's money hadn't reached deep enough to build foundations. She called a source inside the State Police Criminal Investigations Unit. By midnight, the first unmarked state police cars arrived at the compound. By 2 a.m., a forensic accounting team was cataloging the drives and documents in a mobile unit parked between 2 rusting I-beams. By dawn, warrants had been issued for Victor Hale, Marcus Webb, Tom Icard, and a man whose real name turned out to be Raymond Purcell. Not a boyfriend, not a stepfather, but a low-level consortium operative placed in Elena Mercer's life to monitor Lucy and retrieve any materials Ghost might have left behind. They found Elena 3 days later, alive. In a motel outside Branson, locked in a room she'd been moved to after she'd tried to run with Lucy and failed. She was thin and exhausted and had bruises on her wrists from restraints, but she was alive. She was alive because she'd been more valuable as leverage than as a casualty, a fact that said everything about the people who'd held her and nothing about the woman who'd endured it. Roach was arrested at his home in West Plains on a Tuesday morning. He answered the door holding a coffee mug with the Iron Saints logo on it. The state police officer who handcuffed him said Roach didn't resist, didn't speak. Just set the mug on the porch railing and held out his wrists with the expression of a man who had been expecting this moment for 6 years and had spent every one of those years practicing how to hold his face when it arrived. Cole heard about the arrest from Hatchett, who heard it from Deacon, who heard it from the state police detective assigned to the case. The chain of communication was deliberate, each man telling the next, allowing the information to travel through the Brotherhood the same way a funeral notification travels, with weight and gravity, and the understanding that what's being shared changes the shape of everything that came before. Nobody said Roach deserved it. Nobody said he had it coming. The men who had ridden with him for 15 years simply absorbed the truth and let it settle into the same place where they kept their other losses. The marriages, the friends, the versions of themselves they'd left on highways and in bars, and in the quiet hours before dawn, when honesty comes whether you invite it or not. Victor Hale's arrest made the news. Calloway's story ran on 4 platforms simultaneously. Her independent publication, a national wire service, a regional television affiliate, and a podcast that reached 1.2 million listeners in its first week. The story was meticulously sourced. drawing on ghost recordings, his financial documentation, and on-camera interviews with 5 members of the Iron Saints and 11 former employees of Hale's shell corporations who had been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Hale's lawyers issued a statement calling the allegations fabricated. His foundation issued a statement expressing confidence in the legal process. His business partners issued no statements at all, which said more than any press release could. The trial would take months, maybe years. The machinery of justice moves at the speed of paperwork, and paperwork moves at the speed of bureaucracy, and bureaucracy moves at the speed of people who are paid by the hour. But the evidence was in clean hands now. Calloway had copies. The state AG had copies. The forensic accountants had copies. The story was too wide, too public, too documented to disappear into a filing cabinet or a shredder. Ghost had built his case alone, but he'd built it well enough that no single person could bury it. 3 months after the night at the steel mill, the Iron Saints hosted their annual charity ride. The route ran from Poplar Bluff to West Plains and back, 112 miles of Ozark Highway that curved through river valleys and climbed limestone ridges and ran straight through the kind of open country where the sky is so big it makes you feel both small and infinite at the same time. Cole woke at 5 a.m. in the house he rented outside Donovan. He dressed in the dark, jeans, boots, the leather cut that smelled like 20 years of highway and cigarette smoke, and every decision he'd stopped trying to explain. He made coffee in the kitchen, drank it standing at the window, watched the sky go from black to gray to the thin pink of a dawn that didn't owe anyone anything. His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter in Oregon, the one who taught kids to read, the one he didn't see enough, the one whose birthday was stamped on a silver medallion he still wore around his neck. Saw the story. I'm proud of you, Dad. Call me when you have time. Cole read it 3 times. Then he set the phone down and finished his coffee and walked outside to his motorcycle. The engine turned over on the first kick. He sat in the driveway and let it idle and felt the vibration move through the handlebars and up his arms and into the architecture of his chest, where it settled against the heartbeat that had kept him moving through 59 years of bad knees and bar fights and storms, and the kind of choices that look simple from the outside and feel like surgery from within. The rally point was a gas station on Highway 60. By 7 a.m., 60 motorcycles filled the lot. By 7:30, the number had doubled. Bikers from clubs Cole recognized and clubs he didn't. Men and women who'd heard the story and ridden through the night to be part of it. Not because they knew Ghost, not because they owed anyone, because the idea that a man would sacrifice 6 years of his life to protect his daughter and expose a machine that fed on the people it claimed to serve, that idea mattered, and they wanted to ride for it. Briggs was there. His face had healed mostly. A thin scar above his left eye, a slightly crooked set to his nose that hadn't been there before. He sat on his bike with a thermos of coffee balanced on the tank and watched the riders arrive with an expression that Cole recognized as the particular contentment of a man who has been given back something he'd been told was gone forever. Deacon was there. His prosthetic hand had been replaced, a newer model, smoother, the mechanical fingers moving with a fluidity that made them almost indistinguishable from the real thing. He told Cole that the VA had finally processed a claim he'd filed 4 years ago. Cole didn't ask if the timing was coincidence. Some things align when the universe decides the bill's been paid. Fuel was there. Quieter now. Less restless. The nervous energy that had driven him through the crisis had settled into something steadier, the way a river calms after passing through rapids. He'd been the most resistant to doubting Roach, the most vocal in defending the Brotherhood. And when Roach's betrayal was confirmed, Fuel was the one who took it hardest. Not because he'd been wrong, but because being right about people was the only skill he'd ever trusted, and it had failed him. Hatchet was there. His hands were still. Not steady. Still. The tremor that had lived in his fingers for years was gone, as if the act of confronting the truth had removed a vibration from his nervous system that grief had installed. He stood beside his bike, smoking, watching the crowd, and when Cole walked up, he offered a nod that contained everything he would never say. The gratitude, the guilt for the phone that had led the pursuers, the relief that the worst of it was over, the knowledge that some of it would never be over. "Nice morning," Hatchet said. It is. Good turnout. Better than expected. Ghost coming? Cole looked at the highway. He's coming. They heard him before they saw him. A single engine. That low, specific rumble that belongs to a machine that's been rebuilt from the frame up by hands, that knew every bolt and bearing and the exact amount of torque each one needed. The crowd parted without being asked. Motorcycles eased aside. A corridor opened between the gas pumps and the highway entrance, and Ghost rolled through it slowly on a bike that made several old riders inhale sharply and hold their breath. The tank was black. The lightning bolt was silver. The skull sat just below the fuel cap, hand-painted in a style that looked like scrimshaw. Delicate, detailed, the work of a man who understood that art and mechanics are the same discipline practiced at different scales. Ghost had rebuilt his bike. From memory, from love, from the same obsessive precision that had driven him to document every dollar and record every conversation and build a bunker beneath a dead elm tree. And behind him, on the passenger seat, wearing a helmet that was slightly too big and a leather jacket that had been cut down and restitched to fit a child's frame, sat Lucy. She held on to her father's waist the way she'd held on to Cole's, tight, certain, with the grip of someone who has learned that letting go is the one thing she will never do again. The one-eared rabbit was zipped inside the jacket, its head poking out near the collar. Lucy's eyes were visible below the helmet's visor. Dark, watchful, but different now. The surveillance was still there. The assessment. But beneath it was something new, something that hadn't been there in the diner. Trust. Ghost parked at the front of the formation. He killed the engine. The silence was absolute. 130 motorcycles and 300 people, and not a single sound except wind and breathing. Elena stood by the gas station entrance. She was thin still, the recovery from her captivity written in her cheekbones and the careful way she moved. But her eyes were clear and her posture was straight, and she watched her daughter sitting on the back of her father's motorcycle with the expression of a woman who has survived something that should have destroyed her and has decided to call that survival not luck but will. Lucy climbed off the bike. She removed the helmet. She looked at the crowd of bikers and their machines and the sheer volume of chrome and leather and scarred hands and weathered faces gathered in a gas station parking lot at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. A young rider, 20-something, new to the life, new to the road, ink still fresh on his forearms, walked up to Ghost's bike. He studied it with the reverence of a kid examining something he'd only heard about in stories. "That's a beautiful machine," he said. Lucy looked at the bike, then at her father, then at the young rider. "My dad has a bike like that," she said. And this time, nobody froze. This time, every biker within earshot smiled. Some laughed. Some looked away to hide the heat behind their eyes. Briggs put his face in his hands. Hatchet dropped his cigarette and didn't bother picking it up. Fuel turned his back to the crowd and stood very still for a long moment, his shoulders rising and falling with the kind of breath you take when you're letting go of something you've been carrying so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. Ghost lifted Lucy back onto the bike. He pulled his own helmet on. He looked at Cole, who sat on his Harley at the front of the formation, and the two men exchanged a look that didn't need words. It was the look of a road captain acknowledging a rider, a survivor acknowledging a rescuer, a dead man acknowledging the living man who refused to let a 6-year-old girl become collateral in someone else's war. Cole kicked his engine over. The sound rippled through the parking lot. One by one, 130 motorcycles followed. A wave of ignition rolling backward through the formation like thunder building, each engine adding its voice to a chorus that shook the windows of the gas station and sent vibrations through the concrete and into the earth beneath it. Cole pulled onto the highway. Ghost rode beside him. Lucy held on. Behind them, the formation stretched back a quarter mile. A river of chrome and paint and the collective weight of people who had found something worth riding for. The highway opened up. The Ozark Hills rolled green and endless beneath a sky that had finally decided to be blue. The air smelled like pine and warm asphalt and the first cut of summer. The wind caught Lucy's jacket and filled it like a sail. The rabbit's one ear flapped in the slipstream. Elena followed in a car driven by Darlene, the farmhouse woman who had asked no questions and given blankets and made eggs and locked a kitchen window without being asked. The two women rode in comfortable silence, watching the formation through the windshield, And Darlene reached over at one point and squeezed Elena's hand without looking at her, the way women do when words aren't the point. The ride lasted 3 hours. They stopped once, at a diner. Not the diner where Lucy had sat beside a broken jukebox. A different one. Bigger, brighter, with a jukebox that actually worked. Cole ordered coffee. Lucy ordered hot chocolate. This time she drank it. Ghost sat beside her in the booth. He didn't speak much. He'd spent 6 years in silence, and the habit was deep, structural, woven into the way he held his shoulders and positioned his body and measured the distance between himself and every exit. But his hand rested on Lucy's head, gently, barely touching, the weight of a father's palm on his daughter's hair. And that was enough. That was language. That was the whole conversation. Briggs slid into the booth across from them. He looked at Ghost. "You owe me a beer," Briggs said. "I owe you more than that." "Start with the beer. We'll negotiate the rest." Ghost almost smiled, the closest he'd come, a slight movement at the corners of his mouth that suggested the machinery of joy was still there, still functional, just rusted from disuse. "The skull on the tank," Briggs said. "You repainted it." "From memory." "It still looks like a tattoo on a gas tank." "It's supposed to." Briggs looked at the table, then at Lucy, then at Ghost. "I would have come for you," he said. "If I'd known. If you'd told me. I would have come." "I know," Ghost said. "That's why I couldn't tell you. Because you would have come, and they would have killed you, and then Lucy would have lost 2 people instead of 1. Briggs absorbed this, the logic of it. The terrible, airtight, heartbreaking logic of a man who had loved his brothers enough to let them grieve rather than risk their lives. "Don't do it again," Briggs said. "I won't." "I mean it, Ghost. Don't ever disappear on us again. I don't care what's coming. I don't care how bad it gets. You pick up the phone. You call. You let us ride." Ghost looked at the men gathered in the diner. Hatchet at the counter, Deacon by the door, fuel at the jukebox, feeding quarters into a machine that played songs from decades. None of them would get back. Cole at the window, coffee in hand, watching the highway where 100 motorcycles sat gleaming in the sun. "I'll call," Ghost said. Lucy finished her hot chocolate. She set the mug down and looked at it, the same way she'd looked at the first cup Cole had given her on the floor of a dying diner during a thunderstorm that felt like a lifetime ago. She touched the rim with one finger. "Cole?" she said. "Yeah, kid?" "Thank you for the hot chocolate." "Which one? The first one or this one?" "The first one. I never said thank you, and Mama says always say thank you." Cole looked at this girl, then this small, fierce, impossibly resilient girl who had navigated a dead man's map and survived a dead man's war and held a one-eared rabbit through every storm the world had thrown at her. He set his coffee down. "You're welcome, Lucy." She nodded, satisfied. The debt settled, the accounting complete. They rode the rest of the route in formation. The highway curved through river valleys where the water caught the sun and threw it back in pieces. They climbed ridges where the view stretched to the horizon, and the sky was so wide it made the machine seem small, and the riders seem smaller, and the whole enterprise of being alive seemed both insignificant and utterly, unbearably important. Ghost rode at the front. Cole rode beside him. Lucy sat behind her father with her arms around his waist and her face turned to the side, watching the world scroll past. The trees, the fields, the small towns with their gas stations and churches and diners, and the ordinary machinery of lives being lived by people who would never know that a dead man's daughter had ridden through their county on a motorcycle with silver lightning on the tank, surrounded by a family that wasn't built from blood, but from something harder to name and harder to break. The formation stretched behind them like a river finding its way home. And at the very end, riding sweep, the last position, the guardian's position, the spot reserved for the rider who makes sure no one gets left behind. Hatchet rolled steady and sure with his hands still and his eyes clear, and the road unwinding beneath him like a promise that had finally, after 6 years and 100 miles, and one small girl with a one-eared rabbit, been kept.